The night was thick with fog before I even got to the first call. I'd been driving these empty stretches of asphalt for years, but tonight felt different, heavier, like the air itself was holding its breath. My headlights barely cut through the mist, and the street lines seemed to vanish as soon as I tried to focus on them. I gripped the wheel tighter and listened to the hum of the engine, the only sound besides the occasional rustle of dead leaves along the roadside. The radio crackled. It was faint at first, like a whisper underwater. Unit 47, report to Highway 12, mile marker 93. Missing trucker. The voice cut off, then silence. I frowned. A missing trucker? Usually, these things were minor. Some guy who dozed off somewhere or a wrong turn in the fog. But there was something in the way the voice had trailed off, hesitant, almost afraid. I shook my head. Too many late nights had probably scrambled my nerves. I clicked the mic. Unit 47 responding. Can you repeat the location? Static. Just static. I cursed under my breath and tried again. Still nothing. The fog outside seemed to press closer against the car, folding around the headlights, making everything beyond 50 feet look unreal. The trees leaned toward the road like they were listening. My pulse quickened without any real reason. I glanced at the dashboard. Mile marker 93 would be coming up soon. My eyes kept flicking to the rear view mirror, though I knew it was empty, just my own reflection. Staring back with the same uneasy expression, my hand hovered over the radio again, hesitant to press the button. Then it clicked. A second transmission. Softer this time. He didn't make it past fog. Can't find him. The voice was broken, shivering through static. I leaned forward. The words were faint, but they left a chill that ran down my spine. I turned the wheel, making sure my car stayed between the fading lines of the highway. The fog wasn't just fog anymore. It was thicker, moving differently, curling around the headlights, almost like it had its own life. And for a moment, I could have sworn I saw headlights in the distance, but they weren't moving like a car should. They flickered, disappeared, then reappeared farther down the road, like something was teasing me. I tried to calm myself. It's just a trucker, probably pulled off somewhere. I muttered, though my voice sounded hollow in the car. But the radio whispered again before I could even start the engine. Don't follow wrong way. I froze. Wrong way? My stomach dropped. I scanned the road ahead. Nothing. Just fog and black asphalt stretching endlessly. I swallowed hard and forced myself to keep moving. Officers didn't panic. We didn't. But the closer I got to mile 93, the more the fog pressed in. My windows fogged from the chill, and I could see my breath in the dim glow of the dashboard lights. The trees lining the road started to look unnatural, their branches twisting at odd angles, shadows stretching too long. And then a sound, a soft tapping, coming from somewhere behind the car. I spun in the seat. Nothing. My heart thumped against my ribs. I reached for the radio again. Dispatched, you copy? The static hissed. And then a voice, clearer than before, though strained. You shouldn't be here. He never leaves the fog. I swallowed hard, gripping the wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. What the hell are you talking about? I asked, but the line went dead. Just static. The fog seemed to pulse with the silence. And suddenly the road didn't look like it was heading anywhere. Mile marker 93 should have been visible by now, but it wasn't. The tapping came again, faster this time. I glanced in the mirrors. For a split second, I thought I saw a figure standing on the shoulder, tall, thin, maybe wearing a hood, but the moment I blinked, it was gone. I tried telling myself it was a fog, my imagination playing tricks, but the hair on my arm stood up, prickling like tiny needles. I slowed down. The headlights cut weakly through the haze, just enough to show the twisted shapes of trees that looked like they were reaching for the car. And then a smell. Smoke? Burning rubber? Or something else, metallic, sour, sharp. I gagged. The car windows were up, but the smell seeped inside anyway. I checked the road again. No cars. No lights. No sign of anyone else. Only the fog, thick and pressing. And then, in the distance, a pair of headlights. Small, dim, too far to be real. They flickered, moved closer, and then vanished. I could feel my hands trembling now. Every instinct told me to turn around, drive back to the last lit exit. But the missing trucker report was still in my mind. Someone out there. Someone who didn't make it through. My duty was pulling me forward, but my gut screamed to stop. Then the radio clicked again and my stomach sank. A distorted voice, barely more than a hiss. "You see him. He sees you. Don't stop." The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. I gripped the wheel and pressed the accelerator. My headlights barely cut through the fog, and every tree, every shadow seemed to move just slightly, just out of the corner of my eye. I kept thinking I saw something moving alongside the road. A trucker's figure? A shadow? Something human, maybe, but wrong. The fog swallowed it before I could be sure. My pulse raced. My car's engine felt too loud and quiet, and every mile marker I passed seemed to take longer to appear. I want to call it in, to tell dispatch I'd found nothing, that it was probably just a missing person report blown out of proportion. But the thought of those words left my throat dry. What if he really was out there? And what if the fog, what if it didn't let him go? The tapping returned, louder, insistent. And this time it was on the car, not outside, on the roof, like something heavy moving, pacing. My eyes darted to the rear view mirror again. Empty. Nothing but fog and the faint glow of my own headlights. I forced myself to breathe. Slow, deep breaths. Focus. Logic. There had to be an explanation. Wind? A loose piece of metal? A branch hitting the car? Anything. But the tapping grew more deliberate and my chest tightened. The fog seemed to swirl differently now, moving around the car, curling in patterns that made no sense. Then a shadow flitted across the hood. I slammed on the brakes. The car screeched, tires spinning slightly on wet asphalt. I looked, heart pounding, but the shadow was gone. Just fog, just me, just the road stretching endlessly ahead. I wanted to turn around. I wanted to call it a night, drive back to the lit streets, leave the stretch of highway behind. But I knew I couldn't. Somewhere ahead, maybe just ahead, was a trucker who hadn't made it. And somewhere in this fog, I could feel a presence, watching, waiting. I gripped the wheel tighter, swallowed hard, and drove on. Every mile marker closer brought the road into sharper focus. Yet the fog didn't thin. My headlights flickered, my engine hummed, and somewhere beyond the mist, I thought I heard breathing. Not mine, not the car's. Something else. And then, just for a heartbeat, I saw him, or her, a figure standing in the middle of the road, motionless, tall, dark, featureless, just a shadow against the fog. I slammed on the brakes, but the figure didn't move, didn't vanish, didn't acknowledge me, just stood there, waiting. My hands shook, my heart raced, my instinct screamed to run, to swerve, to escape. But the road was empty, the fog pressing, and the radio had gone silent. And in that silence, I realized something. I wasn't alone in this fog, and the missing trucker, he wasn't going to be found the way I thought. I took a deep breath and drove forward, every nerve on fire, and in the corner of my eye, the shadow moved, always just beyond the reach of my headlights, keeping pace, keeping silent, keeping the questions alive. I didn't know what I'd find at mile 93, but I knew somehow that whatever waited for me there, it had been expecting me. The fog had settled deeper by the time I hit mile 94. Headlights from distant cars, if you could even call them cars, glowed weakly through the mist, bouncing off wet asphalt like pale ghosts. Every puddle on the shoulder reflected something that didn't quite belong, twisted shapes that vanished when I looked directly at them. My mind tried to rationalize it, wet paint on the road, distorted reflections, but my gut whispered that this was different. I slowed the car to a crawl, scanning the shoulder. Each puddle became a mirror into some other world. For a moment, I thought I saw the missing trucker standing knee-deep in one, his figure flickering as if he couldn't decide which reality to exist in. Then the reflection rippled and he was gone. I blinked, shook my head. Water doesn't move that way. Fog doesn't move that way. I pressed the radio, hoping for a normal voice. Dispatch, any updates on the missing trucker? Static answered. Then a soft hiss, almost like someone whispered my name through water. My hand tightened on the wheel. I tried to tell myself it was fatigue, nothing more. But even as I said it, The headlights ahead seemed off. They weren't steady. They swayed, as though the car ahead didn't quite exist, or was moving in a way that didn't obey physics. A shadow crossed the road, low, elongated, slipping under the headlights. I slammed on the brakes. The fog swallowed it instantly. My pulse shot up. I wanted to turn around, to leave this stretch of road forever, but the pull of duty and curiosity chained me forward. I told myself I had to see it. Just one more mile. The reflections in the puddles were getting worse. Not just a missing trucker, or whatever I thought I saw, but figures I didn't recognize. Faces blurred, stretched, some staring straight at me from the wet surface. I swerved to avoid one puddle, heart thundering, and my tires hissed across the slick asphalt. My own reflection in the windshield stared back at me, pale and tense, eyes wide. I couldn't tell if I was seeing myself or something else imitating me. A car passed me in the opposite lane. Headlights blinded me for a second, and when I refocused, the fog behind it thickened, curling like smoke from an invisible fire. I could have sworn I saw two figures walking on the shoulder behind the passing car, but when I blinked, they weren't there. I rubbed my eyes, breathing heavy. The road felt endless, yet mile markers seemed to pass slower and slower, as if time itself had warped. I tried the radio again. A voice crackled, faint. "Don't trust headlights." The transmission ended abruptly. My stomach sank. Every instinct screamed to turn around. But curiosity, that stupid human curiosity, pressed me forward. I told myself that if there was anything here, I needed to see it, to understand it. Another reflection caught my attention. A puddle stretched across the lane, wide and dark, and in it I saw the missing trucker kneeling, hands on the asphalt, head down. Then he looked up, or something looked up. The eyes in the reflection weren't human. Wide, unblinking, hollow. I yanked the wheel hard, swerving around the puddle, and the car fishtailed slightly on the wet road. My pulse was racing, my chest tight. I glanced at the mirrors. Nothing, just fog. But the feeling didn't leave, that oppressive sense of being watched. Followed, measured. I pressed on, trying to focus on the road ahead. Yet every glance to the sides made the fog feel like it was alive. Shadows curled and stretched unnaturally. The trees bending over the asphalt, branches scraping at the sky like claws. Then headlights appeared in the distance again, bright but not moving forward, almost hovering. I squinted, trying to make sense of them. They seemed too high for a car, too steady to be anything human. As I got closer, the shapes behind the lights began to shift. Faces or masks, staring at me, reflected in the wet patches of the road. I slammed on the brakes. My car skidded slightly. The headlights flared, then vanished into the mist. I exhaled slowly, trying to steady myself. Maybe it was just fatigue. Maybe the fog was playing tricks. Maybe I was imagining things. But then, a tapping sound, soft, deliberate, on the roof. I froze. No wind. No branches, just the rhythm of something pacing on top of my car. My hands shook as I gripped the wheel. A puddle on the side of the road reflected my face, and behind it, a second face, pale, featureless, watching me. I blinked and it was gone. My heart hammered, so loud it drowned out everything else. I forced myself to breathe, slow, deep breaths, telling myself to stay calm. But the next puddle showed a figure closer this time. I could see the outline of a hat, a coat, the vague shape of a trucker. But the eyes were hollow, black voids that seemed to suck the light in. I drove on, slowly, cautiously. Every puddle was a mirror to something wrong, something broken in reality. The radio whispered again. "He never leaves fog, stay." The words cut through the haze, sending chills down my spine. I shook my head, trying to chase a rational thought. He's probably just hiding, lost, tired. But the fog wasn't just fog anymore. It was thick, purposeful, curling around the road, shaping itself to hide what waited ahead. Then, in my peripheral vision, headlights blinked, approaching fast from behind. I glanced in the rear-view mirror. No car, nothing. The lights were there, though, moving closer, reflecting in every puddle I passed. I pressed the accelerator, heart pounding. The road ahead twisted slightly, like I was being guided or pushed. I reached mile 95, or so I thought. The road ahead didn't look right. The fog thickened into a wall, blurring the lines between asphalt, puddle, and reflection. And then I saw it. The missing trucker's rig, or at least what looked like it. Lights dead, cab tilted slightly, sitting in a pool of fog. No movement, no sound, just there, waiting. I slowed, debating. Step out? Call it in? Something about the way the fog wrapped around the truck felt wrong. The puddles reflected more than the truck. They reflected the road behind me, the shadows of trees, and something else. Shapes moving between reality and reflection. Watching me, I swallowed hard. I took a breath, shaking. One step at a time, I eased closer. My headlights illuminated the asphalt, slick and black, reflecting the distorted shapes in every puddle. And in one of the larger puddles, the reflection showed not just a trucker, not just me, but dozens of figures, tall, thin, featureless, standing silently in the fog. I jerked my eyes up. The fog outside was empty. No one, just road and mist. The tapping on the roof returned. Louder, closer, not random, deliberate. I gripped the wheel, feeling every heartbeat. Every puddle I passed distorted reality further, teasing me, daring me to understand. And in one fleeting moment, I realized that I couldn't see the trucker in reality, only in reflections, only in water, only in glass, only in the mist that clung to every surface. My pulse raced, my mind screamed to turn back. But part of me, a darker, stubborn part, wanted to keep going, to see the end of whatever this was. I pressed forward. The fog pressed back, alive and knowing, every reflection a silent observer, every puddle a window to something I couldn't name. And then, just as I passed the truck, one puddle reflected something new. A pair of headlights rising from the mist behind me, slow, deliberate, moving closer. Only now I realized they were not following the road. They were floating. They were coming for me. I swallowed hard, gripping the wheel tighter. The fog, the reflections, the shadows, they weren't just illusions anymore. They were real. And whatever waited in those puddles and the headlights, in the mist, it knew I was here. I exhaled, trying to force calm. I had to keep driving. 1 mile, one puddle, one heartbeat at a time, and somewhere ahead I knew something waited that I couldn't see yet, but would soon. I saw it before I could even process what it was. Headlights cutting through the fog, flickering in the distance, uneven, almost hesitant. My stomach tightened. The rig, the missing truck, was there, sitting on the shoulder like it had always belonged to this stretch of road, though the asphalt around it seemed untouched, too clean, too still. I slowed, instinctively, feeling the engine's hum echo through my chest. I took a breath and tried to make sense of it. The cab was old, paint peeling, tires half buried in the mist. Nothing moved, no lights in the cabin, no engine noise, just a shape, solid yet unreal. I stepped lightly on the brakes, bringing the car to a cautious stop a few yards behind it. My headlights washed over the rig, and for a heartbeat, everything seemed normal. Then it wasn't. The truck flickered, just slightly, like a bad projection, vanishing for a split second before it reappeared a few feet closer to the trees. I slammed my hands on the wheel. My pulse shot through my veins. That wasn't possible. Trucks don't teleport. They don't move without engines, without wheels. Yet my eyes hadn't lied. I leaned forward, squinting through the fog, trying to convince myself I was seeing a trick of the light. But the ground beneath the truck looked different every time it reappeared. Wet asphalt became black puddles. Shadows stretched in directions that made no sense. The rig wasn't just moving. It was sliding through reality, bending around itself. My hands shook. The radio, long silent, crackled with static. Don't watch or eat. The transmission broke off again, leaving me with the hiss of empty channels. My heart pounded, so hard I thought it might be audible over the engine. I swallowed. Whoever or whatever was sending those messages wasn't trying to help. They were warning me. Another flicker. The truck disappeared entirely. 1 second it was there, looming in the mist. The next, nothing but fog and wet asphalt. I could feel my chest tighten, My throat dry, my thoughts spinning. The air felt wrong, heavier, colder, as if the fog itself had mass. I glanced at the mirrors. Shadows moved just beyond the reach of my headlights, watching me, waiting. I cursed under my breath, trying to rationalize. Maybe it was a prank. Maybe the fog was messing with perception. But my gut, that primal sense I'd learned to trust over years of patrols, screamed that this was something else entirely. Something alive in the mist. Something that didn't want me here, but did want me to leave either. Then the rig reappeared, closer this time, angled strangely, tires sinking into nothing, headlights dim and flickering like dying stars. I could see the cab side mirror, reflecting my own face for a split second. But it wasn't quite me. Something was off. My eyes too wide, my expression too tense. The reflection lingering a moment too long before vanishing. I pressed the accelerator, inching past it, hoping distance might break the spell. But the moment I passed, headlights flashed behind me. Not another car, no engine, no sound, just light, cutting through fog like knives, following every movement. I felt them, eyes, a presence scraping along my back, keeping pace. My chest felt tight. My mind screamed at me to turn, to drive anywhere but forward. But I couldn't. Curiosity, morbid and foolish, chained me to the stretch of asphalt. Another reflection caught my attention in the wet pavement. The truck's shadow stretched impossibly long, folding over itself, then splitting into smaller shadows, each moving independently, reaching toward me. I yelped, gripping the wheels so tight my knuckles burned. One of the shadows, maybe all of them, flinches of alive, recoiling from my headlights but never disappearing entirely. The radio hissed again. He watches you. My stomach dropped. I could feel it now. Not the fog, not the truck. Something else. Something that didn't exist on any map or record. Something that had been here before me and would remain after. And it wasn't just observing, it was aware, patient, waiting. I tried to focus on the road, but mile markers passed like slow, reluctant witnesses. Every time I glanced at the mirrors or puddles, I saw the rig again, shifting closer, closer, just at the edge of comprehension. One moment it was 30 feet behind, the next vanishing, leaving only that unnatural silence that pressed on my ears. My hands were trembling now. I thought about turning the car around, driving backward, but even the idea felt wrong. The fog thickened ahead, curling toward me, alive, and I realized that whatever had been watching the truck, whatever had been following me, wasn't bound by the normal rules of space. It was patient, and it was hungry. I reached for the radio, pressing the mic. Dispatch. Any units nearby? Aye, static. Then the voice, soft, broken, almost human. Don't stop. Don't look. The words were fragmented, distant, but the meaning was clear. Whatever this was, it wanted me moving, but it also wanted me trapped in its attention. Another flicker. The rig appeared in front of me now, impossibly close, tilted as if it had been warped around the road itself. I slammed the brakes, my tires screeching on wet asphalt. The air inside the car felt thick, sticky, almost solid. I could feel my heartbeat echoing in my skull. Then it vanished again. Nothing, only fog, stretching endlessly, swallowing the asphalt like a dark ocean. And yet, the feeling of being watched didn't leave. It had grown stronger, more insistent, a weight pressing against my mind. I could feel the rig's presence in the reflections of puddles, in the distorted shapes of trees, even in the dim glow of my dashboard. I tried to tell myself it was just my nerves, fatigue, a trick of the fog. But the tapping returned, soft at first, then louder, deliberate, on the roof, behind the wheel. Everywhere I turned, the sound followed. My hands shook, my vision blurred slightly, edges of the fog curling unnaturally, framing the road, the rig, the shadows and impossible shapes. I pressed on, a few more 100 yards, daring myself to keep moving, daring myself to face whatever this was. Every reflection in the puddles was a mini trap. Images of myself, the truck, shadows that weren't mine. And every time I blinked, they shifted, moved, watched, waited. Then headlights appeared again, far in the distance, approaching, but not in a straight line. swaying, floating, flickering as if they didn't obey gravity or distance. And behind those lights, I thought I saw more shadows, moving, pacing, following. The rig had vanished from the shoulder, but the presence remained, lingering like smoke and fog, whispering to the air and static. I gritted my teeth, pressing the accelerator, determined to get past whatever this was. The road stretched endlessly, fog curling toward me from every side. Mile markers passed, slow and warped, and every puddle became a mirror to another world I couldn't understand. The rig might have vanished, but it had left something behind, something that clung to the fog, something that felt my fear, something that measured me. A sudden stillness fell. The headlights, the shadows, the tapping, all paused for a heartbeat. I exhaled shakily, allowing myself a moment of relief. Maybe I'd passed it. Maybe it was gone. Maybe I could reach the next exit, find real lights, real people, escape the fog. But then, in a puddle just a few feet ahead, I saw it. Not the truck this time. Something taller, darker, standing just at the edge of my headlights' glow. Featureless, immense still, watching, waiting, and the reflection of the rig appeared behind it. Far too close for reality. I swallowed hard, gripping the wheel so tight I thought I'd crush it. Every instinct screamed to flee, but curiosity, fear, and duty tangled together, freezing me in place. The rig had vanished again in the world, but it hadn't disappeared from the fog, and I realized with a sinking dread that being watched wasn't optional. It wasn't temporary. It was inevitable. The radio hissed one last time before going completely silent. He's always here. I exhaled, my vision scanning every shadow, every puddle, every reflection. The rig was gone. The fog was endless. And I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that the moment I stepped out of this car, I would no longer be alone. The fog was thicker than ever when I finally eased the cruiser to a stop on the shoulder. Engine idling, lights cutting weak paths into the white suit. I felt a weight pressing down on my chest, a pressure that wasn't mine alone. Something was here, watching, waiting. I didn't need headlights or radio static to know that. I stepped out, boots crunching on wet gravel, and immediately the fog seemed to shift around me. It was alive, curling between my legs, wrapping around the tires, moving in ways it shouldn't. The road behind vanished instantly, like the asphalt itself had been swallowed. And then I saw it, a figure just at the edge of my headlights, tall and unmoving. Shadows clung to it as if it were part of the fog itself. I froze, heart hammering. My instinct screamed to retreat, but curiosity, dreadful, stubborn curiosity, pushed me forward. I raised a hand to call out, voice trembling. "Hey, you there?" The fog absorbed my words before they could reach the figure. Silence answered, thick and suffocating. Every step closer made the air heavier, harder to breathe. The figure didn't move, but the fog around it pulsed slightly, like it was drawing energy from the world itself. I could see the faint outline of a coat, but no face, no features, just a dark void where eyes should have been. My pulse raced. Something about it was wrong, not just strange, but fundamentally impossible. I raised a flashlight, sweeping across the figure, and the fog rippled as if startled. For a moment, the shape wavered, then vanished entirely. I spun in place, scanning the empty mist, heartbeat echoing in my ears. Where it had been, there was only fog, yet I could still feel the pressure. Watching, waiting. I tried to shake the feeling, but it clung, cold and insistent. Then a sound, soft, deliberate, scraping along the asphalt behind me. I turned sharply, flashlight cutting through the mist, and for a split second saw headlights floating in the distance, moving impossibly against the road. The sensation of being stalked intensified. I swallowed hard, gripping the flashlight like a lifeline. Another movement caught my eye, this time in a puddle at my feet. My reflection stared back, but not alone. The figure crouched behind me, mirrored perfectly in the water. I spun, but there was nothing there. Only fog, only that oppressive, watching silence. I could feel it everywhere now, in the puddles and the mist pressing against my skin. I forced myself to take another step. Boots sank slightly into wet asphalt, that seemed almost solid and liquid at the same time. The fog shifted with each step, rolling ahead like waves on a ghostly tide. Every reflection, every glint of light seemed alive, teasing me, hinting at shapes that weren't supposed to exist. I realized then that the road had become a stage for something else, something patient and deliberate. My radio crackled faintly, static whispering through the cabin. "Don't move alone." The words were broken, fragmented, yet I felt them in my chest. My fingers tightened on the flashlight handle, knuckles white. Whoever or whatever was sending them wasn't giving me directions. They were giving me warnings. Another flash of movement in the fog. Quick, just at the edge of perception. The shape didn't run, didn't come closer. It just hovered, bending the mist around it. I swallowed, trying to force calm. Logic whispered there was nothing there. Yet every cell in my body screamed otherwise. I stepped forward again, slow, careful. A tapping sound returned, on the shoulder, near the car, but closer than before, deliberate, measured. I froze. My eyes scanned the fog, the trees, the wet road. Nothing. Just fog, just mist. And yet, the sound persisted, moving slightly with every heartbeat. I realized it wasn't coming from the car. It was coming from the world around me, from the fog itself. I raised the flashlight higher, sweeping across the edge of the shoulder. The figure reappeared. Or maybe it had never left. Just a silhouette, blending seamlessly with the fog, faceless, featureless. Its presence was heavier now, oppressive, like it was pressing into my mind as well as the air. I wanted to speak, to call out again, but my voice failed me. Then a sudden flicker, a reflection in a puddle to my right. I saw the figure mirrored perfectly, closer this time, almost reaching toward me. I turned sharply, but there was nothing. The fog shifted, curling around empty space, teasing, daring me to step closer. The tapping resumed, now synchronized with my heartbeat. Each tap a pulse against my chest. I forced myself to take another step. The figure remained still, but the fog moved unnaturally, curling around me like hands, brushing my arms, twisting in ways the wind could never manage. Each step made the shadows longer, the mist darker. I realized the world around me wasn't normal anymore, not just because of the figure, but because the road, the fog, even the asphalt seemed to respond to its presence. I tried the radio again, voice shaking. "Dispatch, unit, do you copy?" Only static, only the faint whisper of fragmented words. "Alone, can't leave." My stomach dropped. The warnings were no longer just warnings. They were instructions, and I had already broken them by stopping. Another flicker in the puddle. The figure's reflection shifted, now crouched, towering impossibly tall, stretching beyond reason. My flashlight trembled in my hands. Every instinct screamed to flee, but my feet remained rooted, a frozen witness to something impossible. I could feel it. Eyes that weren't eyes, attention that wasn't human, watching me, measuring me. I glanced at the road ahead, half expecting the rig to reappear, but there was nothing, only fog, curling and moving as if it had its own intelligence. I could feel shapes forming in the mist, shadows twisting, teasing glimpses of movement. Every reflection, every surface, every drop of water on the road became a window to something else, something patient, something hungry. The tapping became rhythmic, synchronized with some unseen heartbeat. I realized then that it wasn't random. It was deliberate, a signal, a presence communicating without sound. My pulse raced, my breath shallow. I felt small, insignificant, exposed, and yet a dark, morbid curiosity compelled me forward. I stepped closer to where the figure had been, or was. The fog swirled violently, curling around my boots, pushing against me. I could see shapes within it now. Tiny silhouettes, shadows flitting across the periphery of my vision. Not just one figure, but dozens, all faceless, all silent, all waiting. I swallowed hard, trying to keep calm, trying to tell myself it was my imagination. A sudden gust of wind, or something like it, swept through the shoulder. The figure lurched slightly, bending in a way that made no sense, then froze again. I blinked and it was gone. The tapping stopped. The fog held its breath. Silence pressed in, thick and suffocating. My hands shook, flashlight trembling in the mist. I realized then that I was completely alone. Not alone in the literal sense. The figure, the shadows, the fog, they were all here. But physically, the road stretched empty, devoid of any life I could touch. And yet, every instinct screamed that I wasn't alone. That I would never be alone as long as I remained on this shoulder. A low hum began, almost imperceptible, rising from the fog itself. My ears strained. The tapping resumed, faint, distant, but unmistakable. The shadows shifted, forming shapes I couldn't name, bending the air around them. I took a step back, then another, my boots squelching in wet asphalt. Flashlight beam cutting through mist that seemed to thicken with every heartbeat. I glanced at a puddle near my feet. My own reflection stared back, pale and tense. And behind me, the figure appeared in the reflection again, taller this time, stretching impossibly, filling the puddle with darkness. I spun around. The fog held only emptiness. The world outside the reflection seemed calm, too calm, but my skin crawled with a sense of being observed. I forced another step forward. The figure remained visible only in the mirrors and the puddles, in the glint of my headlights. Every reflection teased me, beckoned me, dared me to understand. The tapping grew louder, synchronized with a faint thrum that seemed to emanate from the fog itself. It was alive, aware, waiting. I realized then that I had crossed some invisible line the moment I stopped on this shoulder. The fog, the figure, the shadows, they weren't just tricks of light. They were here, patient and intelligent, feeding on my fear, measuring my hesitation, drawing me deeper. Every instinct told me to run, to escape, but the road stretched endlessly, curling into mist, leading nowhere and everywhere at once. I exhaled shakily, gripping the flashlight tight, voice trembling. I'm leaving. Silence swallowed my words. The tapping stopped. The shadows froze. And in one final moment, a shape appeared in the fog ahead. A doorway, or maybe an opening framed by nothing but white mist. It pulsed slightly, as if alive, waiting for me to step closer. I took a step forward, boots wet and heavy, heart hammering. Every reflection, every shadow, every pulse of the fog seemed to lean toward me, patient, hungry, infinite. And in that moment, I realized the fog had been guiding me all along. Not the road, not the rig, not me, only it. I stepped into it. The world dissolving around me, reflections multiplying, shadows bending and stretching. And as I vanished into the mist, I felt it. The patient, watchful presence, all around me, all inside me, waiting for the next heartbeat, the next move. I almost didn't stop. The road was empty, stretching black and wet under the low glow of the streetlights, and the mist curling along the asphalt made everything feel distant, unreal. But there he was, or she. I couldn't tell at first. A figure on the shoulder, thumb out, back hunched against the cold. Late-night hitchhiker. Stranded, waiting for someone foolish enough to stop. I shook my head. Part of me knew better. Part of me didn't care. I eased the cruiser to the side, engine humming low. The tires hissed against the wet asphalt. I glanced at the rear-view mirror, catching a glimpse of the figure stepping toward the car. Damp coat, dark hair plastered against the face, features shadowed by the streetlight above. I felt that twinge, the one that tells you you're about to do something you'll regret, but I unlocked the doors anyway. The figure slid into the passenger seat, silently. No greeting, no eye contact, just a smell of wet wool and something faint metallic. That made my stomach tighten. I swallowed, trying to seem casual. Where you headed? I asked, keeping my voice steady. Anywhere, they said, quiet, low, but oddly precise. I blinked at the rear-view mirror, trying to catch the eyes. It didn't look at me directly, just past me through the windshield, like they could see the road bending into fog before it even existed. I eased the car back onto the road, headlights cutting through the mist. The silence between us stretched, heavy and uncomfortable. I kept stealing glances, tried to read something familiar. Anything human, but the face was smooth, featureless in the dim light, shifting shadows like a trick of the fog. So you walk here a lot? I asked more to fill the silence than from genuine curiosity. Not really, they said, then paused. But sometimes it's easy to be alone. I nodded, though I didn't know what I was agreeing to. The road stretched out, white lines disappearing into fog. My pulse started to pick up. Something felt off. Subtle, a tension curling in the air. I tried to shake it. Late night pickup for a routine. Just another night on patrol. But this wasn't routine. A sudden flicker in the rear-view mirror caught my attention. A shadow at the edge of the passenger window. Something moving just beyond the visible. I blinked. Gone. I chalked it up to fog, but my stomach clenched. The figure leaned slightly forward, voice soft, almost a whisper. "You've been out here a long time, haven't you?" I froze. That's how did they know? Not just long in hours. Long like I was carrying something inside me. Memories I didn't share. My throat tightened. I cleared it, forcing a laugh that didn't reach my eyes. Yeah, night shifts get long. Another pause. And then, do you ever hear things when you drive alone? I frowned, scanning the road ahead. Fog curled around the trees, and the streetlights smeared like watercolors in the mist. Like what? I asked cautiously. Voices, they said. Whispers. Things that moved just at the edge of your vision. Their head tilted slightly, almost curious, almost amused. I swallowed hard. My pulse spiked. They weren't just talking about the road. They were talking about me, about what I'd already felt tonight, that tightening in my chest, the sense that I wasn't alone. Must be the fog, I said, though my voice lacked conviction. They laughed softly, not a friendly laugh, a laugh that seemed to echo in the mist, brushing against the edges of reality. The fog doesn't lie. It shows you what's already there. I tried to focus on the road, forcing my hands steady on the wheel. Every instinct screamed to glance at them again, but I fought it. Then I felt it, the prickling along my neck, the hairs standing, the subtle shift in the air. I glanced toward the passenger seat. They weren't there. I blinked, heart hammering. The seat was empty. Coat, bag, everything vanished. No trace. I swiveled in my seat, scanning the shoulder. Only fog, curling along the asphalt. Nothing human. Nothing real. Just the hum of the engine and the distant crackle of the radio. I slammed a hand to the wheel, gripping it tight. My pulse thundered in my ears. The fog outside the windshield thickened, curling like fingers reaching in. I told myself it was a trick of the light, a hallucination from fatigue. But I knew it wasn't. The air seemed colder now, heavier. Every reflection in the side mirrors became a question I couldn't answer. I stole glances back and forth, half expecting them to reappear. And then I saw it, just a flicker in the rear-view mirror, a shadow crossing the back seat, impossible, too fast, too fluid. I slammed the brakes, tires squealing softly. Nothing. The road stretched out empty. My breath came in shallow bursts. The radio crackle was static. Don't look, a whisper, barely audible. My hand shook on the wheel. Whoever or whatever was there, they were not human. I tried to convince myself I had imagined it. Fatigue, fog, the long night pressing down. But the feeling lingered. Eyes, watching, waiting. Something had sat in my passenger seat and seen me. Not just my face, but everything inside me. Everything I tried to hide. And now it was gone. The road ahead seemed longer, darker. The mist shifted unnaturally, curling in corners of my vision that made no sense. I pressed the accelerator, heartbeat racing, desperate to reach the next streetlight, the next patch of reality. But the fog followed, brushing against the car like living hands. And then the radio hissed again. Never alone. The words were fragmented, distant, but the meaning was unmistakable. I wasn't safe. I wasn't alone. Not ever. Not while I drove these roads. Not while the fog waited. I gripped the wheel so tight my knuckles burned. The streetlights flickered as I passed, one after another, shadows twisting in impossible angles. Every puddle on the shoulder reflected shapes that weren't mine, shapes that moved just at the corner of vision, teasing, testing, daring me to look. I forced myself to focus. Just keep driving. Don't stop. The memory of the passenger seat, empty now, pressed on me like a weight. The laughter, soft and cold, echoed in my ears. They had been real. They had been there. And the fact that they were gone didn't make me feel better. It made me feel hunted. I tried to shake it, tried to focus on the next mile marker, the next sign, the faint glow of lights in the distance. But the fog didn't let me escape. It followed, curling into the mirrors, into the headlights, into the shadows where the trees met the road. And somewhere in that curling mist, I knew, was a hitchhiker, or whatever had been riding with me, watching, waiting. I exhaled shakily, forcing my hand steady on the wheel. Every instinct screamed at me to stop thinking, to focus on driving. But even as I pressed forward, the unease didn't fade. It pressed against my skin, a presence I could not shake. And then, as I reached the next bend, the reflection came again, in the puddle beside the car, a fleeting glimpse of a dark coat. A head turned just enough to hint at eyes I could not see, and then it vanished. Just fog, asphalt, and the relentless black of the night. I swallowed hard, gripping the wheel, voice shaking. "Who? What are you?" Only silence answered. Only the fog curling along the asphalt, endless, patient, waiting that I didn't think much of at first. The call had been routine, an empty gas station on the edge of town, a report of strange noises from the restroom. Nothing new for nights like this. I figured I'd check it, write it off, and get back on patrol. But even as I parked the cruiser under flickering sign, a tight unease pressed against my ribs, cold and slow. The place smelled of disinfectant and old oil, fluorescent lights humming overhead. I stepped inside, boots squeaking against the tile. The restroom door was ajar, swinging slightly as if nudged by some invisible hand. I paused, letting my eyes adjust, listening. Nothing, just the low buzz of the lights and the distant hum of traffic outside. I pushed the door open and flicked the switch. Lights buzzed, flickered, and then held steady. The stalls were empty. Nothing moved. But as I glanced toward the mirror, something made me freeze. My own reflection looked wrong, not distorted exactly, just off. Shadows lingered in corners where they shouldn't, fleeting shapes behind me, or maybe beside me in a reflection, moving fast enough that I couldn't catch them clearly. I shook my head, laughing softly to myself. It's late, you're tired. But the pit in my stomach didn't ease. My radio crackled quietly, the low static stretching out in long, unsettling breaths. I stepped toward the nearest stall, boots clicking, each echo against tile walls louder than it should have been. And then I saw it. Flickers on the security monitors above the counter. Faint figures moving in the background of empty corridors, impossible, almost invisible. I squinted at the footage, leaning closer. There, a shadow passing behind the soda machine. Another figure reflected in the glass doors, moving fast, too fast for a human. And then, as I blinked, they were gone. The camera showed nothing unusual, just empty hallways, tiles, fluorescent lights. But my gut told me what I'd seen. I stepped back, heart thudding. The air felt heavier now, charged with something I couldn't see directly. Every instinct screamed at me to leave, but I couldn't. I had to know. I had to see what wasn't supposed to exist. I moved toward the sinks, fingers tracing the cold steel edges, eyes scanning reflections, and every mirror seemed to carry a shadow I hadn't noticed before. A movement in the corner of my eye made me whip my head. Nothing, then a faint whisper, low and broken, like someone speaking through layers of fog. I froze, straining to hear. Watching, it seemed to say, not alone. My pulse spiked, and I realized I was holding my breath. I stepped back toward the doorway, heart hammering, but the air shifted, cold and unnatural. The stalls behind me seemed darker, the shadows stretching like fingers along the floor. One by one, I felt the space behind me grow heavier, pressing, watching. The static from the radio grew louder for a moment, then cut out, leaving me with silence that rang too sharply in my ears. The cameras flickered on the monitor again. Figures appeared, just glimpses, fleeting, almost impossible to track. One seemed to linger near the sinks, just beyond my line of sight. Another hovered at the doorway, or maybe outside it, reflected only in the glass. They didn't move naturally, more like they were phasing in and out of the world, testing it, testing me. I tried to convince myself I was imagining it. Fatigue, too many hours on patrol, the endless road pressing into my mind. But the subtle changes and reflections, the flickers on the monitors, they weren't in my head. They were there, or they had been. And the fact that I couldn't catch them clearly made it worse, like my own senses had betrayed me. I moved closer to the nearest stall, hand brushing the door, feeling the cold metal. The air inside seemed to pulse, heavier than the rest of the room. My reflection in the mirror wavered, flickering, and for the briefest second, I saw a figure standing behind me, shoulder hunched, head tilted. Not a person I recognized. Eyes dark, deep, unblinking. I spun around. Empty. Nothing but tiles, sinks, and flickering light. I backed away slowly, heart hammering. And that's when I heard it more clearly. A soft, wet scraping sound. Like fingernails against tile. Slow, deliberate. I froze. The sound didn't come from any stall. It didn't echo off the walls the way it should. It moved. Around me, behind me. But I couldn't locate it. The static returned in the radio. Sharp and loud. Cutting to the low hum of the fluorescent lights. Words broken, fragmented. Look, not see. My hands trembled, and I forced myself to move toward the door. But the restroom seemed to stretch. Longer than it should be. Narrower. Shadows curling at impossible angles. Reflections that shouldn't exist. Another flicker on the monitors. Figures again. One at the corner of a stall. Another leaning near the sinks. Watching me. Waiting. And then, as I stared, one vanished in the thin air. Just empty tile where they had been. My stomach dropped. I felt exposed. Vulnerable. Something unseen observing me. Tracing my movements. I tried to speak. Hello? My voice cracked. No response. Just a hum of lights and the faint, wet scraping. I took a careful step forward. Then another. And then the reflection caught me off guard. In the glass, I wasn't alone. Shadows, multiple, clung to my shoulders, twisted around my reflection, moving independently of me. My heart skipped. I spun, empty again. The feeling pressed in, heavier. Every breath, every movement amplified by the oppressive silence. My mind raced, questioning what I'd seen, what I might have imagined, but the lingering traces, the flickers, the shadows, the whispers, they were real enough to make me doubt everything else. I moved toward the exit, hands shaking, trying to stay calm. Every step seemed to echo unnaturally, tiles amplifying the smallest sound. The lights flickered again. In the corner of the room, a shadow shifted against the wall. I froze. It wasn't human, not entirely. Shape ambiguous, form inconsistent, moving in ways that defied reality. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to focus. Just the door. Just leave. But as I reached it, I felt a presence brush past me. A whisper of cold air. A shadow so close it seemed to press against my skin. I spun. Empty. Again. But the oppressive weight lingered, and my reflection in the glass door seemed distorted, warped. Eyes darker than they should be. Watching. Waiting. I burst out of the restroom into the empty station. Chest heaving. The flickering fluorescent light of the main room offered no comfort. Tiles glistened wet. Shadows lingered where none should have been. I forced my eyes on the monitors again. Figures, gone. Just empty hallways. Nothing left behind but the hum of lights and a faint scent of damp, metallic air. My radio crackled to life one final time. Leave or join, a whisper, impossibly quiet, yet it clawed at my mind. My pulse thundered. I gripped the cruiser keys, hands slick with sweat. The sense of being observed didn't fade when I walked outside. Fog hugged the ground, curling around tires and streetlights. Every instinct screamed at me to drive, to get back to solid roads, solid reality. As I started the cruiser, the monitors flickered one last time. A figure, fleeting, standing just inside the restroom doorway. Head tilted, motionless, unblinking, and then gone. Just me, fog, and the lingering weight of something I couldn't name. I exhaled slowly, gripping the wheel tight. The night stretched ahead, black and empty, but I knew it wouldn't let me rest. Whatever haunted those tiles, those shadows, it had followed. Not physically, not yet, but in some way that pressed against my senses. It waited, patient, unseen, And as I merged back onto the highway, the mist curling along the road, I couldn't shake the feeling that the echoes from that restroom had come with me. Not just sounds or fleeting shapes, but something older, heavier, waiting in the space just beyond vision, waiting to make me see what I could not unsee. The road had swallowed me whole. Nothing but black asphalt and fog, thick enough to dampen headlights, thick enough to make every turn feel like a trap. I kept glancing into the rear view mirror, more than I should, and that's when I saw it, just a flash at first, the silhouette of the hitchhiker I had picked up hours ago. Empty seat beside me. I blinked and the shape was gone. My pulse jumped. I shook my head, gripping the wheel tighter. I'm seeing things, I muttered, but deep down I didn't believe it. The mirror reflected more than the world behind me. It carried memory, suggestion, something I couldn't name, and now it was using it against me. Every time I glanced back, there it was again, sometimes in the passenger seat, sometimes standing just behind the cruiser, as though the fog itself carried them forward. I swerved slightly, heart hammering. The road seemed narrower. The white lines warped under the headlights. Shadows stretched too long, bending into shapes that shouldn't exist. I realized with a sinking feeling that reality had started to twist. I tried to rationalize it. Fatigue, the long hours of patrol, the fog playing tricks. But rationalizing didn't stop the mirror from showing impossible reflections. The dashboard lights glowing redder than they should. My hands seeming longer, thinner, reaching towards something just beyond the windshield. The hitchhiker's eyes stared at me from angles that didn't make sense, unblinking, waiting. I flicked the wipers, trying to clear the condensation, but the image lingered, etched into the glass, almost like smoke. And then I noticed it. The road itself seemed wrong. I'd passed the stretch countless times, but tonight it twisted under my headlights. Signs read the wrong way. Fences doubled back on themselves. I had a brief, nauseating moment where I wondered if I had left the real world behind entirely. The radio crackled, low static, and then words, half-formed, fragmented. Don't turn back. The voice wasn't human, or maybe it was distorted beyond recognition. My hands shook as I reached for the mic. I want to call dispatch to tell someone, anyone, that the world was bending, that the hitchhiker wasn't gone. But nothing came out. The radio hummed again, static stretching into silence that was too loud. I slowed the cruiser, fog curling around the tires like fingers. That's when the rear view mirror showed it again, clear this time. Not a shadow, not a trick. The hitchhiker sat there, calm, almost smiling, but the seat was empty. My stomach dropped. The air in the cabin felt thicker, heavier, pressing against my chest, making it hard to breathe. I blinked, and they were gone. I laughed, though it came out hollow. I'm losing it, that's all. But my mind wouldn't settle. Something about that face, the stillness, the impossible calm, it stayed. I reached for the glove compartment, thinking maybe I could focus on something physical, grounding myself. Keys, paperwork, flashlight, nothing. I realized I'd left a world of certainty behind somewhere near the last bend, swallowed by fog and reflections. Every mirror I glanced into now betrayed me. Streetlights flicker behind me, bending into impossible angles. Headlights from cars, or maybe nothing at all, dance across the rearview glass, creating fleeting figures that vanish when I try to focus. I wanted to scream, to shake the air around me, to insist that this wasn't happening, but the words lodged in my throat. I remembered the gas station, the restroom, the fleeting shadows, all of it feeding into this impossibility, this growing certainty that I wasn't alone, that I had never been alone. The hitchhiker, whoever, or whatever they were, had never really left. They had just shifted, becoming something else entirely, something the mirrors could carry, something that moved between reflections and reality. I gripped the wheel tighter, knuckles white. The fog outside thickened, wrapping the cruiser in a soft, suffocating shroud. Every mirror, side mirrors, rear view, even the small convex mirror on the visor, showed hints of them. Just glimpses, flashes, but enough to make me question my sanity. Enough to make the familiar road feel alien. And then a movement caught my eye in the passenger mirror. The hitchhiker stepped closer, not stepping forward on the seat, but moving in a way that bent the space around them. I blinked. Nothing. The fog pressed against the windows, and I thought I saw fingers, long and thin, pressing faintly against the glass from the inside of the mirror. My pulse rattled my chest. I tried talking aloud, reasoning, convincing myself. It's a trick, just light fog exhaustion. But reasoning didn't stop the shift. The road curves, I knew like the back of my hand, twisted unnaturally. My own hands, reflected in the mirror, moved slightly ahead of my will. I touched the glass. Cold, normal, except for the faint impression of a handprint I didn't make. The rear view mirror became a window to impossible events. I saw the cruiser from outside, fog swirling in unnatural currents around it, figures moving behind me, above me, in ways the road couldn't allow. Each glance revealed something new. A twitch of shadow, a distorted street sign, a fleeting face watching from the darkness. And each time I blinked, it changed. Reality itself seemed unstable. I tried to focus on the road. Streetlights passed, puddles reflected headlights, and briefly I thought I saw the hitchhikers standing on the asphalt. Then they vanished, leaving only wet, shimmering reflections. My chest tightened. Every sound, the engine, tires on asphalt, faint night birds, was amplified, distorted. Time itself felt uneven. The minutes stretched, but the road never ended. I remembered the first night I'd picked them up, how ordinary it had felt, how quickly normalcy had twisted. The fog had started small, harmless. Now it was alive, bending the world, carrying the hitchhiker between mirrors, reflections in space I couldn't name. I reached for the radio again. A calm voice, dispatch, came through. All clear, officer. Routine check. Routine. Ordinary. Lies. Lies to make me think I was still in the world I knew. I didn't answer. I couldn't. The mirrors pulled my attention. The fog drew me forward, and that shadowed figure followed me, patient, unblinking. I glanced once more at the rearview mirror. The hitchhiker leaned closer. Smile faint, impossibly slow. Their eyes, black, endless, locked onto mine. And then the reflection shifted again. Their face blurred, stretched, became something inhuman. And just like that, gone. Empty seat, empty mirrors. Only the fog curling along the road, mocking my relief. But the unease lingered. Every time I reached for a mirror, every glance to check behind me, I knew it would return. Not always the same, not always human, but always watching, always testing, always waiting. The road ahead seemed endless, the fog thickening. Headlights ahead, or maybe just illusions, flickered in the distance. I pressed the accelerator. My pulse matched the thrum of the engine. I couldn't stop looking in the mirrors. Couldn't stop seeing fragments of something that shouldn't exist. I tried with my mind calm, rational thought, focus. But mirrors don't lie when reality bends. And reality had bent. Somewhere back there, the gas station, the restroom, the pickup, I'd stepped across a line. There was no turning back. The hitchhiker, whatever they were, wasn't just a passenger. They were a shadow of this twisted reality, a guide or maybe a test. And as I drove, fog curling like smoke around tires, I realized that I would never leave it behind. Not fully, not while mirrors existed, not while reflections could carry something impossible. The rear view shadow had claimed a part of me, a part that now belonged to the road, the fog, the endless, twisting night. Even now, when I glance at any reflective surface, I see it, a flicker, a shadow, a pair of eyes that don't belong, waiting, patient, endless. And I know the road has only begun to show me what it really hides. I hit the final exit ramp before the city lights faded entirely, and the fog thickened, dragging the world down with it. The sign overhead was barely legible through the mist, paint peeling, metal rusted. It was the kind of place nobody stopped unless they had to, the kind of place the map warns you about in tiny print. But something had drawn me here, an instinct I couldn't name, a whisper I couldn't ignore. I eased the cruiser onto the shoulder, tires crunching over broken asphalt. The fog pressed against the headlights, swallowing them, stretching them into thin, quivering beams. I saw it first in the corner of my eye, a shadow, motionless at the far edge of the ramp. I froze. The hitchhiker, or someone like them. Not quite human, not quite empty air. The figures shifted subtly as I approached, fog curling unnaturally around their legs, making the world bend, making distance meaningless. My pulse rattled. Each step felt heavier than the last, like gravity itself was twisting just for me. I called out. My voice sounded thin, too small, as though the fog had stolen its weight. "Hey, you there?" No answer, only the crunch of my boots, echoing too loudly. The figure didn't move closer, didn't move away. It just waited, patient, impossible. I should have turned back, driven away, but my body refused. Curiosity anchored me. A low hum vibrated through the air. The fog itself seemed to pulse, breathing with a rhythm I could feel in my chest. I glanced back at the cruiser. Headlights flickered as though struggling to reach the world. In the mirrors, fleeting shapes danced, reflections bending wrong. Faces, none my own, staring at me with empty eyes. I stepped closer. The shadows seemed to stretch upward, taller than any human should. The outline flickered in and out, solid one moment, liquid the next, and then I heard it, soft, deliberate footsteps behind me. Not mine. I spun. Nothing. The fog swallowed everything. My breath came in short, ragged bursts. Something in the air shifted, colder now, heavier, pressing against my skin like wet cloth. I saw it then, faintly, just past the shadow. A second figure, smaller, crouched, staring. Not moving, but eyes locked on me. And I realized with a sickening twist in my stomach. They weren't in the same space I was. The fog had divided reality, folding the ramp into layers I couldn't navigate. I stumbled back, pressing my hand to the hood of the cruiser, trying to anchor myself. The mirrors betrayed me. The rear view showed the hitchhiker inside the car again, calm, smiling, though the seat was empty. I could see it clearly. Pale face, dark eyes, but when I turned, nothing. The seat was empty. The ramp was empty. Only fog, breathing, pulsing. I tried to rationalize, told myself I was tired, hallucinating, that the radio static and fleeting reflections had broken my mind. But then a voice, clear, almost close, whispered my name. "Don't leave, not yet." My skin crawled. No microphone, no speaker, just the air vibrating against my ears. I took a step back, heart hammering. The shadow moved slightly. Closer? Farther? I couldn't tell. I reached for the flashlight in the cruiser. The beam cut a narrow path through the fog. It fell across the shadowed figure, and for a moment, it looked human. Just a young man, pale, soaked in mist, expression blank. I exhaled, relief tasting bitter, but then his head tilted wrong, joints bending at angles no human should, limbs elongated in the light. My stomach turned. The flashlight flickered, went dark, then back on, and he was gone. I took another step. The fog rolled with me, moving as if alive. I realized the ramp itself wasn't normal. The asphalt stretched longer than it should, curves bending inward, exits looping into themselves. I stumbled, vision tilting, and that's when I saw the trail, footprints in the mist. Mine? Not mine. They appeared out of nowhere, leading toward the deeper darkness beyond the exit, leading somewhere I didn't recognize. I followed them, compelled, each step heavier. The fog whispered, murmuring half-words, fragments of sentences I couldn't understand. Shapes flickered just out of reach. I caught glimpses of the hitchhiker, or maybe their ghost, standing on the edge of my perception, always waiting, always patient. And then I saw movement in the mirrors again, this time not fleeting. The cruiser behind me appeared warped. Its reflection didn't match reality. Doors open that weren't. Headlights moving on their own. And inside, the hitchhiker stared back at me, smiling wider, knowing something I didn't. My chest constricted. I dropped the flashlight. It clattered on the asphalt, its beam spinning, slicing through the fog. I should have run, should have called for backup, but my legs moved forward anyway, drawn toward the center of the ramp, toward the unseen pull that had guided me here. The air thickened. Each inhalation burned, tasted of metal and wet stone. Shapes swirled in the fog. Faces, hands, impossible angles. And then a sound behind me, low and guttural, like the wind compressing into voice, muttering, shifting. The hitchhiker's voice? Maybe. You can't leave. Not yet. Panic rose, sharp and hot, but curiosity was stronger. I rounded the bend in the ramp, the one that shouldn't exist, and the shadows gathered. The fog parted in a way that felt deliberate, revealing the hitchhiker standing atop the raised concrete divider, impossibly still, impossibly calm. And there was another figure behind him, another and another, shadows folding into shadows, a hierarchy of something unhuman, watching me like prey. I froze, heart hammering, ears ringing. My mind fought the reality twisting around me. Was this the exit? Or just another layer of the fog, another reflection, another trap? Every instinct screamed to leave, but something, need, obsession, compulsion, kept me rooted. The figures shifted, fog flowing around them like water. The tallest stepped forward, their face human for a moment, then warped, teeth too sharp, eyes too dark. A smile stretched in impossible ways. "You've come far," the voice whispered, echoing to the fog, through my skull, through the mirrors. But the exit is never what it seems. I stumbled backward, away from the ramp's edge. The fog congealed behind me, moving like viscous liquid, pulling at shadows. I realized then that every choice, every movement, every glance into a mirror had led here. The hitchhiker, the whispers, the vanishing truck, the fog, it had all been orchestrated, building toward this confrontation. And yet, I wasn't sure what confrontation meant. Fight? Escape? Surrender? The ramp stretched infinitely, folding, twisting, layers of reality collapsing into themselves. The mirrors on my cruiser reflected more than I could comprehend. Doors opening to voids, faces looking back I hadn't seen before. Every reflection a fragment of a truth my mind couldn't hold. A sudden clarity hit me, brief, like a heartbeat suspended in time. The exit wasn't meant to lead anywhere outside. It was a stage, a liminal space, a test. The hitchhiker and the figures were not just watching. They were measuring, probing, folding my perceptions like paper cranes. Each glance in the mirrors, each reflection in puddles along the asphalt, had been part of it. I realized my hands shook visibly, and yet I felt a strange empowerment, understanding, sharp and cold, slicing through the fog. The figures hadn't moved yet. They waited. They wanted me to make the next step. The mirrors confirmed it. The fog suggested it. The ramp demanded it. And then silence. A pause so absolute it pressed against my ears, my chest, my skull. The fog still, the shadows frozen. Even the mirrors seemed to stop reflecting. I could hear nothing but my own breath. And in that pause, I saw the hitchhiker's face clearly, human again, smiling faintly, almost inviting. I swallowed, realizing I would have to choose, to step forward, into whatever lay beyond, or retreat into reality that no longer made sense. My body ached with tension, but my mind was sharp. The fog thinned slightly, enough to glimpse the edge of the ramp, the exit, or the illusion of it. A shiver ran down my spine. This wasn't a place anyone could survive unchanged. I knew that now. The mirrors, the fog, the shadows, they weren't just tricks. They were warnings, consequences, doorways. And the hitchhiker, patient as always, waited for me to cross the final threshold. I stepped closer. The fog rippled. The mirrors flickered. Shapes shifted, merging, twisting into forms I couldn't name. And then a final whisper, soft, intimate, carrying through the mist and into my very bones. The exit chooses who leaves and who stays. I stopped, my chest heaving, my hands trembling, and for a brief moment, the ramp lay empty before me. The fog had cleared just enough to reveal the cracked asphalt, the broken signage, the concrete divider. And yet, I knew it was only temporary. The mirrors behind me caught a glimpse of something I couldn't see in reality. Eyes, dark, endless, waiting, watching. I realized, as I took a hesitant step forward, that this night would not end simply by leaving the ramp. The exit had changed me, and somewhere in the fog, the hitchhiker waited, patient, ever present. I didn't know if I would see them again, or if the road beyond this ramp existed at all. But one thing was certain. I would never trust a mirror the same way again. The radio crackled first, just a hiss at the edge of comprehension. I thought it was interference at first, just a bad connection, but then came the voice, urgent, muffled, almost pleading. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone was unmistakable. Someone was in trouble, or maybe calling me. I leaned closer, hand on the wheel, gripping it until my knuckles whitened. The night was quiet, too quiet, except for the occasional hum of tires on asphalt. I'd been on patrol for hours, the world emptied of traffic, of people, of any reason to expect anything unusual. And yet, here it was, that voice. Static surged across the speaker, spitting fragments of sentences. Help! Please, there. It cut off, replaced by a higher-pitched whine that made my chest tighten. My pulse hit my ears. I adjusted the dial, trying to filter the noise, but it didn't help. The voice came and went, faint echoes buried beneath the static. I tried the microphone, but when I spoke, my own voice sounded distant, swallowed by the night. This is Unit 315, you read? Only static answered, but I swore I heard a faint echo of my own words, warped, urgent, like someone repeating them back from somewhere else entirely. The dashboard clock glared at me. 2:13 a.m. The perfect hour for hallucinations, I thought. Fatigue playing tricks. But that feeling, unease, that prickling at the base of my neck, was real. I felt watched. Shadows clung to the edges of the road, elongated by my headlights, writhing as if the light itself was alive. I eased the cruiser to the shoulder, flipping the radio to the backup channel. More voices, overlapping now, a chorus of muffled urgency. I could almost parse the words. Gano, don't leave, please. And then silence, just static, filling the cab like a presence. My hand hovered over the siren, then dropped. The night didn't need announcing. The night already knew. I checked my mirrors. Empty. Nothing. Just a black stretch of highway curling into the fog ahead. But my chest told a different story. Something moved there, in the edge of the beam, subtle and wrong. 1 second gone, the next gone entirely. My stomach clenched. I told myself it was fatigue, tricks of the light. But the voice came again, clearer this time. Behind you. I spun. Empty road. No one. Not even a stray car. My breath quickened, shallow and sharp. I twisted back to the radio. Silence. Then a faint click, like a door shutting somewhere far away. The speaker hissed, and I thought I caught a shadow in the reflection of the windshield. Not outside, not inside, between. The space where perception fails. I flicked the lights. Headlights cutting through the fog. Movement at the shoulder. I leaned closer, squinting, heart hammering. Nothing. Just mist. But it moved differently than air. Slithered, almost deliberate, curling around a patch of asphalt like it knew where I would step next. The radio flared again, static breaking into words I could barely understand. They're coming, don't answer, run. My hand froze on the wheel. I strained to catch it, but the voice shifted, layered, as if multiple speakers were overlapping. It was urgent, terrified, but also patient, waiting for me to act. I considered leaving. Headlights back onto the road, tires rolling over cracked paint. But curiosity kept me rooted. Some part of me wanted to know who, or what, was calling. Was it a fellow officer? A civilian? Or something else? Something I couldn't name, but that I felt in the hair on my arms, in the vibration under my seat, in the static whispering through my skull. I grabbed the microphone again, stammering, "Dispatch? This is 315. Repeat your message." My voice sounded alien, echoing back from the radio, distorted. And then silence. Just a low hum. I dared to exhale. And then the voice returned, right in my ear, sharper now, urgent. "Don't turn behind you." My head snapped around. The seat was empty. The mirrors showed only fog and empty highway. But the sensation persisted, that gnawing certainty that eyes were on me. And then I saw it. A flicker in the side view mirror. Just for a heartbeat, a figure standing at the shoulder. Half seen, almost more shadow than human. I blinked. Gone. I slammed a hand on the dashboard. Heart racing. Fog pressing against the windows. Shaping and reshaping itself. The figure or figures seemed to shift in and out of the mist. My radio crackled violently, static peeling at the edges of my mind. I could feel it in my chest, pulse quickening, breaths coming short. Every instinct screamed to leave, but something else, some cruel magnetic pull, kept me rooted. I glanced at the GPS. The highway split ahead, ramps leading into dead zones I had never seen before. The radio, quiet now, crackled once more, voice faint, almost pleading. They never leave, they never leave. I swallowed. A bead of sweat rolled down my temple. Shadows moved at the edge of perception. One step wrong, and I felt certain I'd vanished too, swallowed by the fog, absorbed into the static, the whispers, whatever existed in the spaces between the calls. The next crackle came with clarity. Just for a second, I thought I heard my own name. My pulse thundered in my ears. I could almost make out shapes now, figures, silhouettes, flickering between road and shoulder, inside the fog, just at the periphery. They weren't moving like humans. They stretched, distorted, slipping from place to place. I fumbled with the microphone again, voice trembling. Who is this? The answer came in fragments, overlapping. Watching, waiting, don't answer, run. I gripped the wheel tighter, knuckles white. Tires hummed over asphalt. White lines distorted in the fog. Every shadow now a threat. I forced myself to scan the mirrors, windshield, and side windows. Nothing tangible, but a deep, primal sense told me the road itself had eyes. Every reflection, every curve, every crack in the asphalt was alive, watching, testing me. Static surged, and I heard laughter or crying. I couldn't tell. The voice or voices moved through the frequency like a knife, slicing clarity from confusion. Behind you, the whisper seemed to emerge from everywhere and nowhere. I twisted in my seat, scanning, heart hammering. Nothing, but the sensation of presence remained, heavy and pressing. I tried reasoning. Fatigued, stressed, overworked, isolated night patrol. But the unease didn't recede. It deepened. The fog thickened outside, swallowing light, swallowing distance. Every shadow became potential threat. Every reflection, a trap. And yet, I was drawn to it, compelled to answer, to investigate, to understand. I pulled to the side, lights sweeping the foggy verge. My boots crunched the loose gravel as I stepped out, air cold and sharp, carrying a damp metallic scent. The radio went silent. My own breaths echoed unnaturally loud. And then I saw it, faint at first, in the corner of my eye, a figure. Human shape? Maybe, but wrong. Limbs bending wrong. Posture off. Watching me. I froze. And the radio crackled again, whispering my name. Clearer this time, almost intimate. Don't turn. Instinct screamed to run, but I didn't. I couldn't. Curiosity anchored me. Body paralyzed in anticipation and fear. Another crackle. Another fragment of message. Voice fragmented. Pleading. They're close. Can't leave. I dared a step forward. Fog swirled. Shapes bending in impossible ways. I blinked. The figure, if it could be called that, was gone. Only fog. Mist curling in unnatural patterns. Every muscle tensed. The radio hissed one last time. A final whisper. The calls never end. I stumbled back to the cruiser, heart pounding, chest tight. Every shadow, every whisper, every flicker static had left its mark. I was no longer just listening. I was part of it now, tethered to the radio, to the fog, to the night, and somewhere just beyond perception, the voices waited, always waiting. I started the engine, lights cutting to the mist again, tires humming over the asphalt, but I knew the calls weren't over. They would come again, urgent, muffled, impossible to ignore, and next time, I might not be able to run. I thought the first night was just fatigue, static playing tricks on my mind, the isolation of an empty highway bending reality. But tonight it was different. The radio's hiss had changed, no longer random bursts of interference. It had a rhythm, a pulse, and then I heard it. My name, Riley. I froze, hand on the wheel, heartbeat skipping. That wasn't possible. Nobody else was on this stretch of highway. Dispatch had gone quiet for the last hour. The only sound should have been my tires humming across asphalt. But the radio whispered again, soft, insistent, drawn out. "Riley, don't ignore." I glanced at the passenger seat. Empty. Checked the mirrors. Nothing but fog curling along the shoulder. And yet, the voice came, intimate, familiar, calling me directly. I swallowed hard. The frequency crackled, overlapping now, like multiple whispers tangled together. "Riley, watch the shadows behind you." My pulse thumped against my ribs. I wanted to speak, to reply, but the words stuck, thick and heavy on my tongue. I reached for the mic, trembling. "Dispatch? Is someone there? Identify yourself." My voice sounded hollow in the cab, swallowed by static. The only answer was a low, deliberate hiss, and my name again, drawn out like a thread pulling me forward. "Riley, don't leave." The fog outside thickened suddenly, rolling in like water, hugging the road, stretching shadows into impossible shapes. Every light I switched on seemed to bend and twist. Headlights caught movement at the edges. Maybe nothing, maybe someone watching. I didn't know where reality ended and imagination began. I twisted the dial, hoping to find another channel, anything to break the hold. But every frequency hummed with my name, whispered and warped. My own voice bounced back from the speaker, distorted, almost taunting. "Riley, follow see." A shiver ran down my spine. I reached for the shoulder mic again, hands shaking. "Who is this?" I demanded. Static flared in response, louder this time. A new whisper. "Not them, only me." I jerked my head toward the mirrors for a heartbeat. I thought I saw someone in the back seat reflection. Just a shadow, a flicker, then gone. My chest tightened. The cab felt smaller suddenly, walls closing in with the fog pressing outside. I was alone, and yet not alone. I gripped the wheel harder. The whispers continued, changing, layering. "Don't turn, can't leave." Riley, they weren't just voices. They were alive, moving inside the static, inside me, burrowing like a pulse behind my eyes. I tried to shake it off, reasoning with myself. Radios get weird. Night drives get lonely. But the sound of my own name, spoken with intent, was something else. It tugged at memory, at fear, at some deep part of me I didn't want to confront. I'd always trusted sound to tell me the truth. But this lied. Or maybe it told a truth I couldn't handle. The whispers shifted suddenly, urgent. "Look, the road, the exit." My stomach dropped. The last exit. My patrol route had ended miles back, but now it was there, flickering in the fog. Impossible geometry stretching the horizon. I hadn't driven past it, and yet I had. The fog swirled more aggressively, as if responding. Shadows twisted in unnatural arcs. One seemed to reach, stretching across the lane, touching the asphalt like it had weight. I blinked. Gone. And yet, that pressure lingered, like a hand brushing the small of my back. The radio crackled violently. "Riley, closer! Can't hide!" I yelped, yanking the wheel, headlights swinging wildly across the mist. There was nothing, only fog, twisting, curling alive. I could feel it pressing in, shaping the night into shapes my mind shouldn't comprehend. I tried the mic again. "Identify yourself. What do you want?" My own voice trembled. Static erupted, loud and furious, then silence. And then, softer, almost intimate. "I've always known your name, Riley." I slammed a hand to my face, heart hammering. How could it know? My name, my thoughts, my patrol, my fear. Nobody else knew, and yet it did. Someone or something was tracking me, watching, speaking only to me. I glanced at the rearview mirror. Nothing, but the radio whispered again, layered now, overlapping. "Behind, see, don't turn." My pulse roared in my ears. I spun, scanning the empty road. No headlights, no movement. And yet, that feeling, heavy, pressing, suffocating, was real. A new thought struck me, sudden and sharp. What if this wasn't just a voice? What if it wasn't a prank or fatigue? What if it was inside the frequency itself, alive, patient, waiting? I could feel it probing, testing, drawing me in. My hand shook on the wheel. I tried to think of rational things. Radios, electronics, echoes of voices on the wire. But the sensation refused to let go. The whispers became layered, overlapping in almost musical tones. Riley, closer, can't escape. My eyes flicked to the GPS. The last exit blinked, glowing on the screen like a beacon. The road curved impossibly ahead, straight lines bending, fog thickening as though aware of me. I couldn't ignore it. Something waited there, and it knew I was coming. I slowed, heartbeat in my throat. Headlights cut through the haze, and then I saw them, figures in the fog. At first, I thought reflections, tricks of light, but they moved, and they all faced me. Not just the road, not just the exit. They were watching me, and they didn't belong. Limbs too long, angles wrong, some flickering between forms, human and not. I swallowed. The radio flared one last time, soft now, intimate, insistent. Riley, the name's always yours. A gust of wind hit the cab, fog swirling violently, pressing against the glass, pressing against my skin like liquid cold. I slammed the door locks. Every instinct screamed to leave, but my body betrayed me, drawn to the exit like a magnet. The whispers followed, rising and falling, soothing and terrifying all at once. I edged forward, tires crunching on loose gravel, fog parting just enough to reveal the silhouettes. They didn't move toward me. They didn't run. They simply waited, patient, silent, and I understood in that instant that they were tied to the voices, to the names, to me. My hand hovered over the mic, trembling. I whispered, barely audible, What do you want?" The reply was slow, deliberate, almost gentle. "Your name, it belongs, follow the sound." The exit loomed closer, impossible angles bending in the fog. I couldn't tell if I was moving forward or if the world itself had shifted. The whispers layered, overlapping, calling my name, fragments of sentences repeating endlessly. "Riley, closer, closer. The names never leave." A sudden clarity hit me. This wasn't just a road. This wasn't just a night. It was a threshold, a boundary, something beyond the normal world. And the voices were pulling me toward it, toward the unknown, toward whatever waited at the last exit. I glanced once more in the mirrors. The shadows were gone, but the sense of being watched remained heavy and oppressive. And in the radio static, my name whispered again, louder, insistent, personal. "Riley, come, don't run." I gripped the wheel, cold sweat running down my back. The fog pressed tighter, curling around the cruiser, shaping reality into shapes that weren't quite real and yet undeniable. The exit was just ahead now, glowing in the mist like a promise or a warning. I had no choice. I had to see. And the radio, that damned radio, whispered my name one final time as I turned the wheel toward the unknown. Riley. I could feel it before I saw it. An emptiness, heavy and alive, stretching along the asphalt like a shadow I couldn't outrun. The fog thinned just enough to reveal the road ahead, curving into nothing, and the whispers followed, rising in pitch, insistent, calling my name as though they were part of the night itself. "Riley." I swallowed hard, gripping the wheel. My knuckles ached. The cab felt colder, air thick and viscous, pressing against my skin. Every time I thought I was alone, the radio whispered again, louder now, layering syllables in ways that made my chest tighten. "Closer, closer, don't stop." The GPS flickered, a weak glow in the fog. It shouldn't have shown a route. The roads I was following didn't exist. But there it was, a thread of green cutting through gray, leading me deeper. I hated myself for following it. And yet, I couldn't stop. The highway stretched endlessly. Or maybe it looped. Every time I glanced behind, the fog seemed to thicken, shadows shifting at impossible angles. Something was moving in the periphery, always just beyond focus. My mind wanted to rationalize, fatigue, imagination, tricks of light, but the sensation pressed hard against my consciousness, demanding attention. I reached for the radio, hand trembling. "Dispatched, you copy?" Static cut me off, sharp and violent, spitting syllables that were almost words, almost names. And then, "Riley, turn." I froze. Turn where? Every exit I remembered had vanished. The road was empty, featureless, yet somehow alive. I could feel it watching, waiting, a presence folded into asphalt and fog. A flicker in the mirror caught my eye. For a heartbeat, I thought I saw someone standing on the shoulder. Just a shadow hunched, limbs too long. Then gone. I blinked. Nothing. But the sense of being observed didn't leave. I forced myself to keep driving, hand tight on the wheel, teeth clenched. The whispers became more deliberate, almost conversational, layering over themselves. Don't look back. Can't hide. Follow. It was like a language of intent, not sound. I felt them in my mind, tugging, pulling, bending attention toward the horizon. I glanced at the dash clock. Time made no sense. Minutes passed, or hours. The fog ahead was inconsistent, curling in, receding, as if the road itself breathed. My headlights reflected off something metallic at the shoulder, glimmering, but nothing solid. I slowed, heart hammering, the cab vibrating with the tires hum. The radio crackled, softer now, intimate. Riley, do you see them? I swallowed, staring straight ahead. See who? My voice sounded alien in the small cab. Static hiss, then a whisper closer to my ear than the speaker. The watchers, they follow. I shook my head. My pulse roared, a primitive drum of panic. Watchers? What the hell was I doing out here? Alone? My patrol route never went this far. I shouldn't have followed the voices. And yet, I couldn't stop. The road, this empty, impossible highway, was calling, pulling me forward with gravity I didn't understand. Shadows shifted again in the fog, longer, sharper now. At first, I thought they were trees, signs, nothing. But then I realized they weren't following the road. They were facing me, not running, not moving along, just watching. Something in the shape, the angle, told me these were not ordinary shadows. The whispers layered over themselves again. Closer, closer, they see, follow. My head spun. I blinked, trying to focus, trying to anchor myself in reason. But every sense screamed. Something waited, patient, beyond comprehension, tied to my name, tied to me. I tried the mic again. Dispatch, do you copy? I'm not alone. Static swallowed me. Then a single, slow whisper. Never alone. The cab shuddered, and the fog thickened suddenly, wrapping around the headlights, curling over the hood, pressing into the mirrors. My vision distorted, reflections bending, twisting. I caught a flicker behind me, just a movement, no shape, then gone. And yet, I knew it was there. I forced myself to breathe. In, out, in, out. The whispers softened, almost a lullaby now. Riley, the road follow. I had no choice. My body moved forward, hands gripping, every nerve alive, alert. The empty highway stretched endlessly, and with each mile, reality thinned. I glanced at the rearview mirror again. For a second, I thought I saw someone standing on the shoulder, tall, thin, impossibly still. My stomach dropped, blinked, gone. Only the fog remained, curling in on itself like smoke, alive and watching. A sudden clarity struck me. This wasn't just a road. This wasn't just night. The whispers were a conduit, a lure. The highway was a threshold, a path beyond reason, and I was being drawn to it. My pulse raced, fear and curiosity colliding. The radio whispered again, layered, urgent. Don't stop, follow closer. My knuckles bled into the wheel. The road ahead bent impossibly, a gentle curve that didn't match any map, any memory. I had to turn, had to follow. The figures in the fog, watchers, shadows, remained patient. I thought of exiting, turning back, but the whispers changed, intimate, coaxing. Back, never, forward, the road ahead pulsed, light bending, fog folding over itself. My instinct screamed to run. My mind begged for reason. My body obeyed the pull. Something brushed the cab, a whisper, cold air, or maybe touch. I flinched. Headlights caught a metallic shimmer on the shoulder. I slowed again. Nothing tangible, only reflections, only shapes in fog, only the feeling of eyes, watching, waiting. The whisper crescendoed, overlapping, rhythmic, almost musical. Closer, follow, can't escape. I gritted my teeth. I knew I was nearing something. Something that wasn't meant to be seen, but I had to see it. And then the exit appeared. A faint glow, impossible in the gray haze. No signs, no markers, just a stretch of asphalt curling into nothing. The shadows stood along it, faceless, elongated, waiting. The whispers softened, intimate. "Riley, this is the way." I stopped the cruiser, engine idling, heart pounding, hands trembling. The fog pressed against the cab like liquid, curling over the windows, wrapping the vehicle in a cocoon. I wanted to speak, to rationalize, to turn, but the radio whispered again, drawing me forward. "Riley, step, come closer." I opened the door. Cold hit me like ice, crawling under my skin. Fog twisted around me. Alive, shadows rippled in ways that made no sense. Shapes bending, stretching, reaching toward me without moving. And in the radio, my name drawn out patient, Riley. Step by step, I moved toward the exit. The whispers layered, now gentle, seductive. "Closer, see your name, always yours." My heartbeat roared. Every instinct screamed to run, yet I couldn't. The road, the fog, the watchers, everything pulled me forward. I reached the asphalt of the exit. Shadows shifted around me. The whispers quieted, intimate, deliberate. "Riley, welcome." I froze, and then I realized the voices weren't calling me from the radio. They were coming from the fog, from the road, from inside me. My name had always been theirs, and I was only now understanding that the highway was never empty. And just as the first true shapes emerged from the mist, faceless, patient, I felt a hand, real or imagined, pressed lightly on my shoulder. The whispers, layered and delicate, concluded, "Never leave." I wanted to scream, but there was no sound left. Only the fog, the shadows, and the empty highway stretching beyond comprehension, pulling me forward, deeper, into the unknown. The night was thick, heavier than any fog I'd driven through before. The headlights barely cut through it. And yet there was something beyond the mist, something that wasn't just the absence of light. A sound reached me, faint at first, so distant I thought it might be my imagination. A voice crying, pleading. I froze, hand on the wheel. My pulse slammed against my ribs. "Hello?" I called, voice tight, shaky. The sound didn't answer. It came closer, carried on the wind, but impossible to locate. No cars, no signs of anyone. Just the road, empty, stretching like it wanted to swallow me whole. The radio crackled, static at first, then the faintest whisper. "Riley," my stomach dropped. That name again, drawn out, intimate and urgent. But this time, over it, a different sound, the scream. Short, ragged, human. Someone was calling. Someone needed help. Or maybe it was a trap. I gripped the wheel harder, muscles tense. My headlights caught the fog curling like smoke, shifting shapes that didn't belong. At the shoulder, shadows stretched into impossible angles. For a second, I thought I saw a movement. A figure? Gone in the blink of an eye. I tried to reason. Could be a stranded driver. Could be nothing. But the voice sounded real. Painful. Terrified. My gut told me to drive past, to leave it alone. My training screamed caution. But curiosity, morbid and insistent, pulled me forward. The whispers layered now, mingling with the distant cries. Closer, follow, see? My head spun. Every instinct screamed that I was walking into something I wouldn't come back from, and yet I couldn't stop. The fog clung to the tires, curling like it had its own pulse. I slowed, scanning the shoulder. The screams continued, closer now, almost beside the cab. I leaned out, trying to pinpoint them. Nothing. The air felt thicker, colder. My breath fogged in the beam of the headlights. White fingers that vanished before they could touch the ground. The radio hissed again, the voice low, deliberate. "Riley, do you see them?" I shook my head, swallowing hard. "See who?" My voice sounded foreign to me, hollow, swallowed by the fog. The whispers answered, patient and teasing. "They're always there, waiting." A shadow flickered at the edge of the headlights. My stomach twisted. Something was standing there, or maybe crouching. I couldn't tell. Just a silhouette, taller than any human, stretching like it was bending reality. And then it vanished, leaving nothing but fog and an echo of the scream. I forced my hand steady, gripping the wheel. My pulse roared. The road ahead twisted in ways I didn't recognize. Curves that shouldn't exist, lines of asphalt that made no sense on any map. The screams moved with me, always to the left, to the right, impossible to reach. The radio whispered again, softer now, intimate. Closer, step closer. My head ached. Every sense screamed that I was being lured, pushed into the fog, towards something alive, aware, waiting. The voice called, pleading. Help me. I tried to reassure myself. Could be an animal. Could be someone trapped. Could be my mind unraveling. But the feeling of eyes, watching, patient beyond comprehension, didn't lie. Something was here, tied to my name, tied to the road, tied to me. The fog thickened, swirling around the cab. Headlights reflected in shapes that weren't solid, bending and flickering, almost human. I blinked. They shifted, always at the edges, never center, like reality itself was teasing me. The scream came again, sharp, jagged. My breath caught, this time unmistakably close, right beyond the shoulder. I slowed to a crawl, heart hammering. The fog hissed, curling over the tires like liquid. My knuckles whitened on the wheel. Another whisper, don't stop, follow. I shook my head violently, as if to rid the voices. But the road ahead, the fog, the shadows, all were pulling me forward. I could feel in my bones. I had to see, to understand, to find the source of cries. I forced myself to keep moving, slower, careful. Every shadow stretched longer, angles sharper, moving in impossible ways. The screams twisted, layered, echoing from multiple directions, impossible to locate. And yet, I knew they were there. Someone or something was screaming, waiting for me to find them. The radio hissed, a single voice cutting through. Riley stepped. My hand shook violently. The fog seemed alive, pressing in, curling over the hood, wrapping around the mirrors. My reflection warped in them. My own eyes looked alien, wide with fear. A flicker at the left shoulder caught my attention. A figure, or half a figure, standing, tall, limbs elongated, head tilted wrong. I blinked. Gone. But the scream continued. Closer now, ragged, human, almost desperate. The road bent impossibly. A curve that hadn't been there before. The whispers encouraged. Closer, closer, see, my pulse slammed. Every instinct screamed to turn, to flee, but the cries, they were human. Maybe, and I couldn't leave them. I slowed to a stop at the shoulder. The fog pressed against the cab. Alive, my breath came in short bursts. The scream was right there, too close to ignore. I reached for the door. Cold bit my hands. The whispers layered over themselves, soft, patient. Riley, step closer. I opened the door. The fog hit me like ice, crawling under my skin. Shadows twisted and rippled around me, bending, folding, reaching. And then the scream changed. No longer pleading. Urgent, desperate, directed. Help me. I stepped out. Every muscle screamed in protest. Heart hammering in my chest. The fog wrapped around my legs. Thick, damp, almost solid. Shadows move at the edges, impossibly fast, yet patient. I wanted to turn. I wanted to run. But I couldn't. I had to find the source. The whispers coaxed, intimate. Closer. See your name. This is yours. I swallowed, every nerve alive, every sense screaming that I was being lured into something beyond reason. The fog thickened, curling over my shoulders, over my head, over the ground. And then I saw it, or thought I did. A flicker, a form just beyond the fog. Human? Maybe. Or maybe something else. Wrong in ways I couldn't comprehend. The scream ceased. Silence pressed in. And in that silence, the whispers layered patient. Always here, never leave. I froze. The road behind me vanished into gray nothingness. Ahead, the figure waited impossibly still. The fog pulsed around it, alive. I realized I had stepped off the highway into something else entirely. Something patient. Something that knew my name. Something I couldn't outrun. The whispers layered, almost comforting now, coaxing. Riley, step come closer. I wanted to scream, My voice failed. Only the fog, the shadows, the distant, but impossibly near screams remained. And as I took a tentative step forward, the figure stretched, elongated, bending reality, its face never forming, yet I knew it was watching, waiting, and the distant screams, layered and impossible, echoed through the night, calling me forward into the unknown, pulling me deeper into the fog, into the waiting darkness. The radio went silent, just like that. 1 second it was whispering my name, luring me down the shoulder of that endless road, and the next, nothing. Static gone, voice gone, even the faintest hum of background chatter vanished. My fingers tightened on the wheel. I glanced around. The fog pressed close, heavier than ever, curling over the hood like a living thing. No lights in the distance, no movement, just a faint reflection of my own headlights swallowed by gray. I felt a pulse of fear, cold and sharp, crawling up my spine. I was alone, completely alone. The realization hit like a punch. Alone, yet not alone. The air vibrated, subtle, almost imperceptible. Tiny movements at the edges of my vision, shadows folding and stretching where nothing should be. My heartbeat raced. I wanted to tell myself it was my imagination, that the voices, the screams, they had all been tricks of stress, fatigue, the long night behind the wheel. But I knew better. Something had been there, and maybe it still was. I tried the radio. Nothing. Dialing other channels yielded nothing. Even the emergency frequency was dead, flat. Silence. I tapped it again. The whispering had stopped, yes, but a new sound emerged, a low, almost imperceptible hum beneath the engine, beneath the tires, beneath my own breathing. It grew rhythmical, syncing with my pulse. The fog shifted around the headlights. 1 second a clear path ahead, the next a wall. Shadows where shadows shouldn't be, moving just beyond clarity. Shapes bending, elongating impossible angles. My mind refused to settle. Every time I blinked, the road seemed longer, straighter, narrower, than a curve that had not existed before. I remember the screams. Distant, fractured, impossible to locate. Now, in the silence, they returned but fragmented. A whisper from the left, a ragged cry from behind, a cough, a pleading voice just ahead, all layered on top of each other. I couldn't tell where they came from. Couldn't tell if any of it was real. My reflection in the rear-view mirror startled me. Eyes wide, almost unrecognizable. Dark circles, pale face, sweat clinging to my hair. I thought I saw someone behind me, seated in the back of the cab. Blinked. Gone. Nothing but my own terror staring back. The fog thickened again. The cab lights barely penetrated it now, casting a pale halo around the truck, nothing beyond. And then the road seemed to split. My headlights reflected on asphalt that curved in impossible angles, folding on itself. My pulse pounded in my ears. Couldn't stop, couldn't turn, couldn't go back. I gripped the wheel so tightly it hurt. The hum beneath the engine rose, vibrating to the pedals, the steering column, my chest. The fog itself seemed to breathe, in and out, matching my own breaths. And then I saw movement. At first, I thought it was a fog playing tricks. A shadow shifting, tall, human in shape, but wrong. Limbs bending at unnatural angles, head tilted too far. Eyes, but they were eyes, reflecting my headlights like black mirrors. It didn't step forward, didn't run, just waited. My mouth went dry. I tried to speak, call out. Nothing. Voice gone. The hum, the vibration, the stretching shadows, they swallowed sound. I realized the radio had been my lifeline, my connection to the world. And now, gone. Offline, the vehicle felt heavier, sluggish, like the fog had seeped into the cab itself. I tried to start the engine again, rocking it back and forth. The hum responded, rising, pulsing, almost sentient. My chest tightened. I needed to move, needed to escape. But the road, it wasn't the same. Every turn, every bend, every stretch of asphalt seemed designed to trap me, to disorient me. A shadow flickered past a window, a fleeting shape at the periphery. I swerved slightly, hard in my throat. Nothing. just fog curling in unnatural waves. My headlights caught brief glimpses, shapes that twisted, almost humanoid, reaching toward me, then vanishing the moment I focused. I tried to remember the last clear landmarks. Nothing. Trees bent at impossible angles. The shoulder disappeared beneath fog and mist. The horizon gone. The world shrank around me. Alone. Offline. I thought of the screams again. Distant, fractured. But I realized they were getting closer. Layered. Overlapping. Not behind me. Not ahead. All around. Confused, fragmented, desperate. My skin crawled. I wanted to scream. Nothing came. The hum beneath the truck rose again. Almost a voice now. Low, deliberate. I heard my name whispered in it. Not through the radio. Not through speakers. Inside my skull. Riley, the air vibrated with it. Palpable. My hands shook. I could feel the pressure of something. Waiting. Patient. Patient beyond comprehension. I gripped the wheel tighter. Knuckles white. The cab lights flickered, dimming and flaring, reflecting shapes that weren't solid, twisting like smoke. I blinked. When I looked again, the figure was closer, no longer at the edge of the fog. Not a shadow, almost solid, and yet wrong. Limbs bending, head tilting. No face, but aware, watching. I swallowed. My voice cracked. Who's there? Silence. Then a whisper layered with a hum. Here, always here, never gone. The fog pressed against the tires now, moving like water. Shapes shifted, stretching, folding, waiting for something. My pulse roared. I wanted to flee. Couldn't move backward. Couldn't move forward. The road, the world, all of it warped around me. I thought of the radio again. Lifeline, connection, reality, gone. Offline. I was untethered, alone, vulnerable, and yet there was a pull, something in me that refused to leave, that needed to understand, to confront. I forced the cab forward slowly, trembling. The hum rose, layering with whispers, screams, the twisting fog, movement at the left shoulder, figure or half-figure, twisting impossibly, bending, reaching for me. I flinched, heart hammering, blinked, gone. Only the fog. Only the hum, only the realization, alone, completely, entirely, cut off. The screams fractured again, now overlapping, closer, impossible to locate. The whispers became urgent. Step closer, this is yours. I felt the cold crawl up my arms, inside my chest, not cold air, but presence. Patient, watching, waiting for me to cross some invisible line. I gritted my teeth, hands shaking. The cab felt heavier. My headlights dimmed again. Shapes moved in them. Shadows not cast by anything solid. Twisting over asphalt, over fog, over the edges of the world. My mind screamed for sense. Logic. Reality. But none of it existed here anymore. I remembered the screams. The voices. My name called. Pleading. Teasing. Urgent. I had to know. I had to see. Slowly, I edged the cab forward, inch by inch. Each second stretched into an eternity. Shapes flitted at the edges of vision. The hum pulsed beneath my chest. I swallowed. The whispers layered over themselves. Riley, always, never gone. The fog parted briefly. A glimpse ahead. Impossible to read. Just the faintest outline. The road seemed endless. The shadows alive. And me, alone, offline, pulled forward, deeper into the mist, into the waiting darkness, into a world that had forgotten what was real. And as the hum rose, the shapes twisted, the whispers echoed, I realized this was only the beginning. Alone, offline, untethered. Every instinct screamed danger, yet every nerve demanded I continue. I gripped the wheel, trembling. The figure, or whatever it was, waited, and the screams layered, impossible, patient, calling me forward into the unknown, deeper into the fog, where reality itself bent and waited. I had no radio, no world, no lifeline, just the road, the mist, and them, waiting, watching. The first report came over the scanner, just as I turned onto the old stretch past the ridge. A car, white sedan, vanished from a northbound lane near marker 17. No accidents, no calls from the driver, nothing. The dispatcher's voice cracked, static crawling over the edge of her words. I leaned forward, gripping the wheel, eyes scanning the fog-draped road. Marker 17. I knew it. Everyone in this precinct knew it. A simple milepost, 100 stretching along the highway. But it carried a reputation. Drivers swore that for a few miles beyond it, things disappeared. Cars, people, sometimes both. Nothing official, of course. Just whispers. Rumors that curled into nightmares after long shifts. I passed the marker slowly, headlights cutting through the low fog. The asphalt seemed cleaner here, almost polished, reflecting my lights too sharply. The air felt thicker, heavier, like it had been pressed into the shape of the road itself. A chill ran over me, even before I heard the next report. Another disappearance. Black pickup. Last seen near marker 19. Same story. No signals, no calls, just gone. Dispatcher's voice trembled. I could feel it over the radio, like static was crawling along the edge of the signal, tickling my nerves. My knuckles whitened on the wheel. The highway stretched ahead, a ribbon of gray between fog and darkness. The markers flashed past at odd intervals. 18, 19, 20, but sometimes they seemed farther apart, sometimes closer, like the road itself had shifted. My eyes caught shapes moving just beyond the headlights. Deer? Maybe, but their movements were wrong. Jerky, deliberate, too precise, too watching. I tried to focus on the scanner. Another call. A lone motorist, a woman, reporting marker 21. She said something strange, something she couldn't explain. The words came garbled, chopped by static. Just gone marker, milepost not there, then silence. I blinked. My windshield wipers cut through a thin drizzle. I checked the mirrors. Nothing. Road behind me stretched empty, silent. The markers, marker 18, 19, 20, reflected faintly in the wet asphalt, but marker 21 gone, just like the woman said. I slowed, peering into the fog. Something shifted in the fog, a shadow that shouldn't be there. Or maybe it was the road bending, the light warping. My pulse sped. I reminded myself, I'd been awake for 14 hours. My mind was tired, eyes playing tricks. Yet a small, stubborn part of me knew the truth. Something was wrong here, very wrong. The scanner crackled. Another report. Marker 23. Blue sedan. Vanished. Witnesses, none. Dispatcher paused. No one else on the line. No patrols nearby. I swallowed, dry mouth. The pattern was obvious now. Cars vanishing along the markers, mile by mile, like the road was consuming them. Fog swirled around my headlights, forming shapes just at the periphery. For a moment, I thought I saw a figure standing near the shoulder, dark coat, motionless. Blinked. Gone. Only fog. Only the road stretching ahead. I slowed further. Each milepost flicked past like a heartbeat. 21, 22, 23. I passed them carefully, scanning the edges. Shadows moved just outside my lights. Far too quick, slipping in the fog as I tried to focus. My chest tightened. I should have radioed it in. But the scanner, already static, already fragmented, felt unreliable. And that thought settled cold. What if talking about it made it worse? Marker 24. Nothing unusual. The fog hung low, clinging to the asphalt. My tires hissed over wet patches. Then headlights. Another vehicle just ahead. I squinted. Blue sedan? No, too high. SUV? Doesn't matter. It slowed, matching my pace. No lights in the cabin. No one inside. Or maybe someone, but I couldn't see. My pulse hammered. I checked the mirrors. The fog behind me had thickened. I tried to remember every case I'd read in the files. Disappearances near markers. Night shifts. Fog. Silence. Roads swallowed whole. The official reports blamed mechanical failure. Panic. Sometimes hypothermia. But I knew better. I'd seen patterns. Clues in the reports. And now, I was driving through it. Alive. Yes, but aware that the road watched, that the markers held memory, that the fog remembered every vanished vehicle. The scanner crackled again. Static. Then her voice, clearer, closer. Marker 25 black sedan. Please. And cut. My stomach sank. Marker 25 came too quickly. I hadn't expected it yet. The milepost appeared, tall, white, numbers reflecting faintly in my headlights. The shoulder empty. No car, no person, just the fog pressing close. I slowed almost to a crawl. Every instinct screamed to turn back, to leave this stretch. But I couldn't. Something drew me forward. Curiosity, fear, the need to witness what was happening. My fingers gripped the wheel so tightly the knuckles burned. And then the markers, they shifted, just slightly at first. A blink, then another. Position seemed wrong, numbers jumping. 24, 26, 24 again. My pulse quickened. The road ahead no longer made sense. Straight stretches bent unnaturally. Fog thickening. The highway folding on itself. I thought I saw a movement at the shoulder. A shape crouched low. Blue sedan? Black sedan? I couldn't tell. I flashed the lights. The shape vanished in the fog. My breath came fast. Heart hammered. The highway felt alive now, bending, shifting, reacting. The scanner hissed, static sharp. Another call, but this time different. Not a dispatch, not a report, just a voice. Familiar. Mine? No, someone else. Whispering. Riley, don't stop, follow. My hand trembled on the wheel. Follow? Where? I glanced at the mileposts. 25, 26, 27, all ahead, all fading, all bending in impossible ways. I passed marker 25. The shoulder seemed wrong. Asphalt stretched too far. Shadows clung to the edges. I thought I heard tires scraping behind me. Low, dragging. I spun the mirrors. Nothing. Only fog, only markers. 26, 27, each one a heartbeat, each one a warning. A sudden flare of headlights. Far ahead. A car? Maybe. But it disappeared almost immediately, swallowed by fog. Then nothing. Just me, markers, and the whispering static over the scanner. Don't stop, follow. I forced myself to drive, inch by inch. My mind raced. The highway had become a maze. Fog thickened, shapes moving in and out, shadows elongated over the asphalt, folding into the markers. Each disappearance report flashed in my mind. Patterns, warnings, curses whispered in dispatch logs. Marker 28 appeared, just barely. Another vanishing report on my mind. The road seemed to curve unnaturally, the fog pressing in like walls. The hum of the tires over wet asphalt sounded louder. Then briefly silence, no static, no voices. My stomach sank. Too quiet. Waiting. Marker 29, 30. The highway stretched unnaturally long between them. Shadows flitted just outside headlights. Shapes bending in impossible ways. I tried to remember where the exits were, where signs led back to familiar roads. Nothing made sense. Everything shifted with the fog. Another report came over the scanner. The first clear words in minutes. Marker 31, do not stop the road. Then static, harsh, biting. My chest tightened. I realized with a cold certainty that the markers, they weren't just mileposts. They were thresholds, landmarks of some strange geometry the road used. The disappearances weren't accidents. They were patterns. And now I was inside it. Fog thickened at the cab edges, curling like smoke over the hood. My headlights caught brief glimpses of shapes bending, crouching, watching. No car, no driver. Only presence. Waiting. Patient. I swallowed dryly, aware of my pulse echoing against the fog. Marker 32 came into view. My vision blurred. Shapes flickered. Blue sedan? Black sedan? Something crouched, shifting. Disappearances weren't just reports anymore. They were instructions, warnings, signs of what would happen if I slowed, if I hesitated. And I realized every mile I drove, every marker I passed, I was following the pattern, drawn into it. The whispers over the scanner, the vanished cars, the bending road, They were guiding me, somewhere deeper into the fog, into the impossible stretch where the highway itself forgot its shape. I gritted my teeth. Tires hissed over asphalt that seemed to pulse beneath me. Shapes danced at the corners of my vision. The markers glimmered briefly, numbers flickering, and through the fog, I caught a glimpse of vehicle, faint, transparent, drifting across the shoulder like a memory. I swallowed, pulse roaring, marker 33. The fog closed around it, a wall of white, and I understood the road wasn't cursed. Not exactly. It remembered. It consumed. It waited for attention, for curiosity, for someone awake enough to notice, someone foolish enough to follow. I pressed forward into the fog, into the markers, into the strange geometry of the highway that devoured cars and names alike. My headlights cut through nothing. My pulse echoed against everything. Alone, alert, alive. And the road waited. The first car appeared half buried in fog, headlights reflecting off dam paint. A rusted sedan, doors wide open, empty. No footprints, no sign of struggle, no tire marks leading away. Just a car, stranded like it had been dropped from the sky. My pulse thudded in my ears as I parked and stepped out. Damp mist soaked through my jacket almost immediately. The night was quiet, impossibly quiet, except for the distant hum of my patrol engine fading into the fog. I crouched by the front tires. Faded tracks led toward the shoulder, half erased by drizzle and wind. I followed them with my flashlight, careful not to lose the faint indentations. But they stopped, abruptly, mid-shoulder. No continuation. It was as if the car had walked away. I shook my head, rational thoughts clawing at the edge of panic. Cars didn't vanish. Roads didn't erase tire tracks. And yet, here I was, staring at the impossible. I reached for the radio. Static, whispered fragments. Nothing, follow don't. I shook the receiver, cursed under my breath. It wasn't clear who or what was speaking, but it was close. Too close. My fingers gripped the patrol's hood like a lifeline. Another vehicle appeared a few hundred meters down the fog-laden road. Black SUV, doors closed, engine cold, no lights, no signs of life. Tire tracks, barely visible, led in a jagged path toward the ditch. I crouched again, tracing the marks. They curved strangely, as if avoiding some invisible line, then disappeared. Nothing continued beyond a certain point, as if the asphalt itself had swallowed the vehicle. I stepped back, heart hammering, chest tight. The fog thickened, curling around my boots. A faint reflection of headlights in the mist caught my attention. Not mine. Farther up the road, shapes, indistinct, shifting, hovered just at the edges of visibility. I squinted, trying to make sense. Was it another car, or something else entirely? The radio crackled again. A name. Mine. Riley, watch, don't look back. I froze. Breath shallow. My own voice whispered across static, warped, fragile. I glanced behind. Nothing but fog and markers, white reflections stretching into gray infinity. I could feel the hairs on my neck rising. The road had become unrecognizable. A shifting corridor, a living thing curling around me. I followed the tracks of the black SUV further down the shoulder. The mist thickened, pressing against my skin. The tire marks seemed to flicker, disappearing with every step I took. I reached the point where the tracks should have ended. Only fog, only the highway stretching endlessly in both directions, unchanged yet impossible. I backed up, scanning for signs of life. The fog pressed harder now, as if it had weight, as if it were pushing me. Shapes moved within it. Just at the corner of my vision, I spun in place, flashlight slicing through gray, but the shadows slipped away. The vehicles remained, abandoned, impossible, their tracks fading to nothing. Another whisper on the radio. Not my name this time, just a fragmented plea. Help, follow, don't stop. My stomach churned. Follow what? Who? I checked the markers along the highway. 26, 27, 28, all standing. Numbers blurred by condensation. Yet something about them seemed off. Each marker a warning. A threshold I hadn't noticed before. I retraced my steps of patrol. Tires hissing over wet asphalt. Fog curled around the vehicle, obscuring my view. I tried the radio again. Silence. Nothing but faint static, like distant breathing. My pulse throbbed. I couldn't explain it, but the highway felt alive, aware, tracking, judging. The abandoned vehicles weren't abandoned. They were bait, or perhaps memories. I drove slowly, lights scanning every inch of the shoulder. Every few hundred meters, more vehicles appeared, some missing tires, others doors hanging open, engines cold and silent. I traced tracks. Faded tire imprints led toward impossible angles, sharp curves into fog, vanishing midair. I started keeping count, almost instinctively. For cars, 5, 6, each track a mystery, each vehicle a warning. Marker 29 appeared through the haze. I stopped. The fog pressed against the windshield like a hand. I could see shapes within, moving, watching. I thought I heard a low scrape, like nails over asphalt. I turned, headlights swinging, but nothing. The tracks led nowhere. No footprints. No debris. Just air and fog and the faint impression that something had passed moments before me. I felt a presence behind me. Not a car. Not a person. Something patient. Watching. I tried to call dispatch. The radio sparked, static swallowing my words. Don't follow. Another fragmented voice. Familiar yet not. My stomach dropped. The fog seemed to pulse with it, thickening, twisting the road ahead. Marker 30. A final abandoned car. A faded sedan resting at the shoulder. Tires pressed shallowly into the wet asphalt. Tracks led off, zigzagging in impossible directions before disappearing. I traced them, heart pounding. Then a sudden shift. The air went still, the fog suspended. Shapes flickered at the edge of vision. The radio hissed again. Riley, they wait! I stumbled back to patrol, breathing hard. Every instinct screamed to leave. Every rational thought told me to drive straight, avoid the shoulder, ignore the impossible. But curiosity, dread, the sense of something unfinished, of things I had to witness, kept me rooted. I had to see the pattern, understand it. I started the engine. Tires hissed over wet asphalt. The abandoned cars remained, like markers themselves, fading into gray. Tracks, faded impossible, etched into my memory. I drove slowly, watching the markers shift slightly, numbers flickering like pulses of light. Marker 31, 32, I couldn't be sure. Then I saw it. Not a car, not a figure. A shadow stretching across the fog, elongated, bending unnaturally. I caught it in the corner of my eye. Blinked. Gone. The tracks nearby, fresh impressions, yet fading into nothing. Hinted at movement, presence, life, but no one, no thing stood there. I tried to rationalize. Animals? Wind? My mind playing tricks after long hours on night patrol. Each theory fell hollow. Each step forward intensified the tension. The abandoned vehicles, the disappearing tracks, the fog. Everything seemed linked. A pattern I couldn't read yet. A logic that defied sense. Marker 33. A rusted truck, tilted on its side. Faded tracks curling off the shoulder, then abruptly ending mid-fog. I shivered. The road ahead pulsed faintly in headlights. Shapes moved, not just shadows this time. Something solid darted between markers just beyond visibility. I gripped the wheel until my knuckles ached. Another whisper. Clear, sharp, close. Riley, follow, understand. My breath caught. The road, the vehicles, the tracks. They were trying to tell me something. Or warn me. Or trap me. I couldn't tell. I didn't dare step out. The patrol felt fragile, tinny against the immensity of fog and unknown. I pressed forward, slow, deliberate. Every abandoned vehicle a question. Every fading track a riddle. The fog thickened, twisting around markers, folding the road into strange angles. Tire impressions appeared, vanished, reappeared. The air smelled damp, metallic, charged. My chest tightened with the realization. The highway wasn't static. It remembered. It consumed. It rearranged itself to confuse, to lure, to warn. Marker 34, 35. I drove between them. The abandoned cars becoming landmarks. Shadows brushing the edges of perception. The radio whispered, fragmented. Don't stop, follow watch. Each word wrapped in static, half understood, half command. I stopped at marker 36. Exhaust hissing. Engine idling. Fog hung heavy. I stared at the last tracks I could see, tracing them into nothing, and then I understood, not fully, not clearly, but enough. The vehicles, the tracks, the fog, the shifting markers. They were a map, not for me, for something else, something patient, waiting. The night pressed in closer. I leaned against the wheel, trying to steady breathing, mind racing. Abandoned cars lined the foggy shoulder like ghosts frozen mid-motion. Faded tire tracks led to nowhere. The highway, impossible, alive, seemed to watch me, measure me, consider me. And I knew this was just the beginning. The fog pressed against the windshield like a hand I couldn't shake. Every mile I drove, the markers blinked in my headlights. The same numbers over and over. 36, 37, 36 again. My pulse tightened. Roads didn't loop. They didn't curve back on themselves. Not like this. But the further I drove, the more the highway seemed to fold in on itself, stretching and contracting at the same time. I checked the rear view mirror. Nothing but gray. Yet I could feel eyes, or something, tracking from just beyond my vision. Shapes flicker at the edge of headlights, too quick to identify, yet unmistakably there. I gripped the wheel until my knuckles burned. Every instinct screamed to stop, to pull off the shoulder. But stopping felt wrong, as if the road itself would consume me if I dared pause. The abandoned vehicles from earlier had vanished, not gone around a bend, gone entirely. The shoulders were empty, tire tracks smoothed into the asphalt, erased. My stomach turned. Were they ever real? My mind tried to rationalize, but logic felt fragile in this place, stretched thin like the fog curling around patrol. Radio static broke the silence. Whispered fragments again. Riley, don't, not yet. I froze, gripping the wheel. My name, clear and intimate, spoken through hissing static. My throat tightened. No one else had heard it. No dispatch, no other officers. Just me. The road seemed to pulse with the sound, vibrations running through the tires into my chest. Markers passed in a rhythm that made no sense. 38, 39, 38, 40, 38. They flickered in my headlights, numbers bending, stretching. The road itself felt alive. Each marker I passed seemed to lean closer, tilting slightly, watching. The fog twisted, forming walls that narrowed the road, pressing in, breathing around me. I caught sight of something ahead, a dark shape between two markers. My headlights flicked over it. A person, a figure hunched over the asphalt, blinked and it was gone. Tracks appeared nearby, fresh, deep tire imprints that led to nothing. The highway had swallowed them, and my own pulse rattled in my ears like a drum I couldn't silence. I tried the radio again. Static, then a whisper. Riley, keep moving. My voice caught. The sound seemed to echo inside the patrol itself. I glanced at the rear view mirror again. Shadows moved, always at the periphery, not approaching, not fleeing, just present, waiting, measuring. I drove past what should have been marker 41, but the numbers repeated. 39, 40, 39. My mind swam. Roads didn't loop. Highways didn't repeat markers. But the patrol continued, engine whining softly, tires hissing over wet asphalt. Every bend led to the same fog, the same gray stretch, the same impossible sequence of markers. I noticed the asphalt itself wasn't consistent. Sections stretched unnaturally, fading into gray, then snapping back as if I'd passed a threshold into another version of the same road. Headlights caught something faintly reflective, metal, paint. I slowed. A faint silhouette appeared, crouched at the shoulder, blinked, gone. The road stretched empty again, markers looping as if mocking me. The whispers returned. Riley, understand, clearer now. A sense of urgency threaded into static. I pressed the patrol's brakes, heart hammering. The vehicle skidded slightly over slick asphalt. Nothing, only fog and the relentless repetition of markers. 38, 39, 38. I shook my head, trying to force sense, to force direction. I thought about turning back, but the rear view mirror didn't show the road behind. Only fog, only darkness pressed thick and heavy. It wasn't night anymore. It wasn't day. Time had blurred. My watch had stopped. Seconds felt like hours, minutes like eternity. The road had no past, no future, only this endless stretch. A marker leaned slightly more than the others. 38, tilted unnaturally, paint peeling. I could swear it moved, slowly, closer, then recoiled as if startled. A wind rose from nowhere, hissing over the asphalt. Tires skidded slightly. Something scratched along the side of the patrol, a whisper of movement just beyond my headlights. I slammed the brakes, lights sweeping the shoulder. Nothing. The marker had snapped upright again, rigid and unchanged. I drove on. Markers flickered, looping endlessly. 39, 40, 39. My stomach churned. My mind teetered on the edge of panic. What was the highway doing to me? It wasn't just space bending. It was perception itself, folding me into its rhythm. Each bend, each marker, each stretch of fog felt deliberate, like I was being drawn, pulled towards something unseen, unavoidable. Then I saw it again, a shadow in the distance. Human shape? Animal? Impossible to tell. It stood between markers, unmoving. Headlights caught a glint of eyes, reflecting coldly. I slowed. The patrol engine hummed nervously, tires squealing softly, and the shadow vanished. Just vanished. Tire tracks appeared at the edge of the shoulder, leading to nothing, fading as I watched. I tried the radio once more. Static. Then my name again. Riley, follow, understand. The voice seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. From the patrol, the fog, the road itself. My hand shook on the wheel. I wanted to scream, but no sound came, only the hum of the engine and the relentless whisper of markers looping endlessly. Marker 42, or was it 38 again, shifted under my headlights. Numbers bending, tilting, the fog compressed. Shapes flickered along the shoulder in peripheral vision. I couldn't tell which were real, which were illusions, which were memories of vehicles, of people, of the night itself. The patrol continued, obedient, carrying me through this twisted corridor of fog and markers, tires hissing over asphalt that wasn't entirely solid. I caught glimpses of abandoned cars, faintly familiar rusted doors open, but not fully, partially there, half real. Tracks led from them, then dissolved mid-fog. I could feel something watching from those vehicles, something patient, deliberate, something that knew I was following, that expected me to follow, and that waited for me to reach the end, which I didn't know existed. The radio whispered again, fragments overlapping. Don't stop, they wait, understand. My breath caught. The words weren't just warnings. They were instructions, commands, guidance, or perhaps traps. I couldn't tell. The markers continued to loop. 38, 39, 40, 38. The road had no end, no beginning. Only this endless stretch that bent reality itself. Shadows flickered more clearly now. I thought I saw figures crouched along the shoulder, reaching, waiting, observing. I blinked. Gone. Tracks appeared briefly where they had crouched, shallow, impossible, then vanished. I leaned forward, eyes straining, pulse hammering. I was trapped in the highway's rhythm, caught between markers that repeated, fog that thickened and thinned at will, and whispers that guided and threatened in equal measure. I thought about turning the patrol around, but the rear view mirror was still empty, just fog. There was no behind. There was no way back. The highway had become a loop, a corridor, a cage. Each marker a heartbeat of this living, breathing space. My name, repeated in the radio, became a mantra. Riley, follow, understand. Marker 43, or 38 again, twisted in the headlights. Numbers shifted, bending toward me, tilting like a predator leaning in. The fog pressing tight. The patrol felt fragile, hollow, suspended in a corridor gray. I could feel the highway itself pulsing beneath the tires, alive, measuring, judging. And then I realized the tracks weren't leading anywhere because there was no destination. The highway didn't end. It only contained. It only folded, repeated, and drew me forward. And I couldn't stop couldn't look away. The markers flickered, endless. The fog thick and alive, and the whispers called me by name, urging me forward into the impossible. I gripped the wheel with trembling hands. The patrol carried me, tires hissing over asphalt that bent and folded in ways my mind refused to understand. Shadows flickered at the edges of perception. Abandoned cars appeared and vanished like ghosts. Markers looped endlessly. 38, 39, 40, 38. And the whispers never ceased. Riley, follow, understand. And I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that I would never escape. The road had become its own world, its own time, its own predator. And it had me. I drove on. The fog hit before I could see it coming, creeping across the highway like it had been waiting. Headlights barely cut through the gray, their beams swallowed almost immediately, leaving the patrol to float in a haze that felt alive. I pressed my fingers harder against the wheel, eyes straining, trying to catch even a glimpse of the road ahead. Every mile felt like a gamble. The markers were there, but barely. Dim reflectors glimmered faintly, flickering in the lights, as if uncertain whether they wanted to exist. I tried to focus, tried to count the distance, the bends, the shoulder, but the fog blurred everything. And then I noticed something wrong. The markers weren't consistent. A few were tilted, half buried, yet perfectly visible, while others vanished entirely, leaving gaps in a pattern that made no sense. I shifted in my seat, the engine whining as the tires hissed over damp asphalt. The low fog pressed against the windshield, tiny droplets that turned the world into a smear gray. I could hear my own breath, loud in the cabin, uneven and ragged. Every instinct screamed caution, but some deep part of me knew I couldn't turn back. I couldn't leave whatever was waiting in that fog. A movement flickered at the edge of the headlights. Trees, maybe, or shadows that looked like trees, swaying even though the wind was still. I blinked. Nothing. Just fog, just asphalt, just the endless stretch of highway that seemed to stretch farther than it should. The radio crackled. Faint static at first, then a whisper. You shouldn't. I jerked the volume up. Silence. The patrol felt smaller, enclosed, almost fragile, swallowed by the fog pressing in on all sides. The road curved, a gentle sweep, but the curve seemed longer than it should have been. My pulse quickened. Every turn revealed the same gray expanse, the same uncertain markers. I realized I couldn't remember how long I'd been driving. Minutes? Hours? The fog made time feel elastic, stretching it, compressing it, twisting it until it had no meaning. I tried to focus on small details, reflectors, cracks in the asphalt, fading paint, but nothing anchored me. Every sign of the world was partial, distorted, unreliable. And then I saw it. A faint shape crouched on the shoulder, just beyond the reach of the headlights. I slammed the brakes, heart hammering. My breath froze. The figure didn't move, just crouched, watching. My pulse rattled in my ears. I forced myself to lean forward, squinting, but the fog thickened the instant I focused. And then it vanished. No trace, no tracks, no sign it had ever existed. Just a road, endless and gray, swallowing everything. I checked the rear view mirror. Nothing. The highway behind me was empty, fog rolling endlessly. But something was off. The fog wasn't just behind the patrol. It seemed to move with me, curling, pressing, twisting. I tried to radio dispatch, but only static answered, like the fog itself had plugged a line. I pressed on, tires hissing over wet asphalt, lights barely cutting through the gray, and then I caught movement again. A car? No, an abandoned vehicle just ahead, on the shoulder, doors open, half lit by the patrol's headlights. The fog made the edges shimmer. I slowed. The vehicle looked familiar, but wrong. Rusted, yet freshly scratched. Empty, yet somehow present. I couldn't explain it. The markers repeated themselves, dim glimmers flicking like a broken signal. I counted. 12, 13, 12, 13. My stomach churned. Roads didn't loop like this. Highways didn't double back invisibly. And yet, the numbers taunted me, repeating endlessly. I swallowed hard, trying to steady my breath. The radio crackled again. Static at first, then a whisper. Riley, keep driving. The sound was unmistakable. My name, clear, intimate. I jerked the volume up. Only static remained. My throat tightened. Who, or what, knew my name out here? The fog pressed closer. It was cold, damp, unnatural. It swirled around the patrol, curling under the chassis, clinging to the tires. The headlights weren't just failing. They were being absorbed, devoured by the gray that seemed to have weight, substance, and intention. I realized I couldn't see more than 20 feet ahead. The road had become a tunnel of fog, the markers dim beacons that offered no guidance. I thought about stopping, but the shoulder felt wrong. Empty yet heavy, pressing, like the fog would reach in and pull me out if I slowed. I gripped the wheel tighter. Tires squealed softly over wet asphalt. Headlights cut shallow cones into gray nothingness. And I moved forward, compelled by something I didn't understand, following markers that bent and flickered in impossible ways. Shapes appeared in the fog. Trees? Poles? Or memories of poles. Shadows that shouldn't have existed. I blinked. They twisted, elongated, vanished. And somewhere beneath it all, I felt it, a rhythm, a pulse, as if the fog itself was alive, breathing, waiting, watching. The abandoned vehicle flashed again in the headlights, now closer. I could see scratches on the paint, marks that looked like fingernails, tires half sunken in the asphalt, though the road didn't look soft. My hands shook. I wanted to stop, wanted to look away, but curiosity, dread, and some deeper instinct pushed me forward. The markers passed an uneven rhythm. 14, 15, 14, 16. I realized I could no longer track distance. Time had no meaning. The patrol's engine whined, the tires hissed, and the fog whispered against the windshield. My name, faint and intimate, returned on the radio. Riley, keep moving. The voice wasn't human, yet it was personal, deliberate. I passed another shape. Human? Not human? A crouched figure at the shoulder, just out of reach. Headlights caught the glint of eyes. I froze, blinked, gone, but tire tracks remained. Fresh, leading nowhere, disappearing into the fog. The highway had swallowed them, and me. I tried to radio again. Static, then a whisper, almost a hiss. Don't stop, don't. I swallowed, hands trembling. The fog thickened, curling under patrol, around the tires, folding the road into itself. The markers flickered, bending numbers, leaning, repeating. Each bend, each stretch of asphalt, each flicker of light seemed deliberate, purposeful, predatory. I realized I didn't know which way I'd come from, or if I'd come at all. The fog erased memory as effectively as it erased vision. Each moment was immediate, eternal, isolated. Shapes shifted at the edges of perception, cars and markers folding in and out of reality. And my name, whispered in the static, called me forward, demanded attention, promised understanding I didn't want. Another vehicle appeared, crouched like the first, rusted, scratched, abandoned, but somehow alive in its presence. The shoulders shifted subtly beneath my tires. I pressed the brakes lightly, lights sweeping the fog. Nothing moved, nothing but the markers, repeating, and the whispers. Riley, understand. My pulse rattled my chest. The road itself seemed to stretch and bend now, asphalt rippling under tires. Markers flickered in impossible sequences. I caught glimpses of shapes, humans, memories, on the shoulder, crouching, reaching, observing, and the fog thickened like a wall, pressing against patrol, against me, pressing through my thoughts, my eyes, my skin. I realized the patrol was alone. I was alone, and yet the fog whispered, the shapes moved, the markers bent, repeating endlessly. Time had fractured, distance had fractured. I was trapped in a corridor of gray, with only faint, flickering signals, markers, shapes, abandoned vehicles, to guide me, and the whispers, intimate, knowing and insistent. Riley, keep moving. I drove on. The fog didn't just cover the road. It moved. I swear it shifted in layers, curling like smoke over invisible currents, thick enough to obscure anything beyond the headlights. I leaned forward, gripping the wheel so hard my knuckles ached. Something was out there. I could feel it, the weight of it in the silence, pressing to the fog toward me. Shapes flickered at the edge of the light. Trees bent, or maybe they were people bending. Figures crouched, elongated, vanished the instant I blinked. 1 second, a shadow, the next, nothing. And yet, every time I passed, I felt eyes, hundreds, maybe thousands, tracking the patrol, watching, waiting, a movement on the left. Quick, subtle, almost polite in its timing, like it knew I was watching. I swerved slightly, heart hammering. Nothing. The fog swallowed it instantly. I told myself it was just my imagination, the long night, the isolation. But deep down, I knew better. I tried a radio dispatch. But the static wasn't just interference. It hummed, resonated with the fog itself. Sometimes I could swear I heard something inside it. Voices. Faint, fleeting, indistinct. Not human, not language, but intention. A pull, a beckoning. The road stretched and folded under the headlights. Markers appeared, twisted, repeating, bending at angles they shouldn't. Every so often, a white figure would appear in a reflective puddle just beyond the shoulder. My first instinct was to look away, to avoid seeing something I couldn't explain. But I couldn't. My eyes kept snapping back. And each time, the puddle showed the same thing. A figure, tall and pale, drifting just out of reach, dissolving when I blinked. I slowed the patrol, careful, tense. Every sound was amplified. The hum of the engine, tires on wet asphalt, my own shallow breathing. The fog pressed closer. I tried to track the movements, but the shapes didn't behave like anything I knew. They appeared and disappeared, folding space as they moved. Sometimes behind me, sometimes beside me, always in the corner of vision. Always gone when I tried to focus. The radio crackled. Static first, then a whisper. Don't look. My pulse jumped. I yanked the volume up, scanning the fog for anything, anyone. Silence. Just fog. The whisper wasn't just a warning. It was intimate, directed. I knew it knew my name, though it never spoke it aloud. I reached for the shoulder to pull over, but the road felt wrong beneath the tires. The asphalt shifted subtly, almost imperceptibly. Markers flickered, numbers repeating. 12, 13, 12, 13. I couldn't tell if I was moving forward or looping. Every instinct screamed danger, but curiosity, dread, and some deeper instinct kept me driving. A figure appeared closer this time. Pale, featureless, just a smear of white against the gray. It moved sideways along the fog, gliding, bending impossibly, sometimes crouched, sometimes upright, always just out of reach. I swerved slightly, then jerked back. Tires hissed. The figure vanished instantly, leaving only the faint outline in the mist. I felt my chest tighten. The fog wasn't just around the patrol, it was inside it, coiling beneath the chassis, wrapping under tires, pressing at the windows. The figures weren't trapped in the fog. The fog trapped me. Every blink made the shapes vanish and reappear elsewhere, mocking me, showing me that this stretch of highway wasn't just road, it was a stage, and I was the audience. The radio crackled again. Riley Keep? Not complete words. Not human, but deliberate, insistent. A rhythm, a pulse, aligning with the fog, the road, the white figures. I realized I wasn't driving through fog. I was driving through something alive, watching, calculating, folding space so I could never see the end. A car appeared on the shoulder, rusted, doors half open, lights off, yet it shimmered, reflected by fog, as if it were both there and not. My eyes traced its edges, searching for movement. Nothing, and yet I could feel something from inside it. Something aware. I swallowed, hands trembling on the wheel. Movement flickered ahead. Not on the road, not in a puddle, above the fog, suspended, impossible. A shape drifting horizontally, long limbs bending at angles that made no sense. My stomach turned. I blinked. Gone. The fog rippled in its place, folding inwards. My mind tried to rationalize it. A trick of the headlights, a reflection, fatigued. But it wasn't. I knew it wasn't. Another whisper on the radio. Look, behind, my chest seized. I jerked the patrol around slightly, checking the rear view mirror. Fog, endless gray, empty markers. But then a flicker, a pale silhouette just behind the patrol, moving in perfect sync, fading in and out like a broken film. I blinked. Gone. The fog swallowed it instantly. The highway began to feel unreal. Distances stretched, markers repeated, shapes appeared and vanished with cruel timing. I tried counting, tracking, remembering, but everything bent. I felt myself unspooling. Time fractured, stretched, snapped back, and the whispers followed me, carried by static in the radio, echoing in the fog. Don't, look. I forced myself to slow, the tires hissing over wet asphalt, engine whining. Every instinct screamed to stop, to turn back. But where would I go? Behind me. The fog moved like liquid, like it wanted to close the loop. Ahead, markers bent, repeated, twisted, and the figures, white, pale, impossible, drifted at the edge of perception, beckoning, teasing, reminding me I wasn't alone. The abandoned vehicle shimmered again. I passed it slowly, headlights tracing its edges, rusted, scratched, silent. Yet I felt it watching. Something inside it, a presence, a weight, something aware, stared without eyes. My pulse rattled, stomach turned, the fog pressed closer. I wanted to stop, to scream, to leave, but some compulsion, a whispering instinct I couldn't name, pushed me forward. Another shape appeared in the fog, closer now, tall, impossibly elongated, a smear of white that bent the light, the road, the air around it. I jerked the patrol slightly, tires screeching. The figure vanished instantly, leaving only the faint suggestion of footprints in the fog, trailing nowhere, fading before they touched asphalt. The radio crackled, louder this time. Riley followed, the voice, faint, intimate, inhuman, commanded me. I tried to respond. Static, only static. My heart raced, chest tight, vision blurred with sweat and fog. The patrol's lights barely cut through the gray. Every shadow flickered. Every movement in the corner of my vision teased me. Dissolved, reformed elsewhere. I drove on. The figures drifted. The fog pressed. Markers repeated. Radio whispered. Everything was alive and aware, folding the road, bending time, twisting perception. I realized I wasn't moving through the fog. The fog was moving me, shaping the highway around me, shaping me, until I could no longer trust my senses. A pale figure appeared directly ahead. Standing? Floating? I couldn't tell. I blinked. Gone. But the impression lingered. The fog rippled like water disturbed, folding the road under patrol. Tire tracks led nowhere. Markers repeated, and the whispers became a pulse inside my chest. Don't stop, follow, don't. The patrol's engine hummed. Tires hissed, and my hand shook on the wheel. Shapes danced, vanished, reappeared, teasing, beckoning. I couldn't stop. I couldn't look away. The fog had me. The white figures had me. The whispers had me. I realized I was alone, but not really. Never alone. Always watched. Always followed. Always inside something that moved, thought, and waited, and somewhere just beyond the edge of my headlights. The fog promised more. More shapes, more whispers, more understanding I couldn't yet grasp. I drove on. The road stretched ahead, slick with fog and half-light. My tires hissed over damp asphalt. The engines hummed low and steady, almost comforting. But it wasn't enough. Something else was there, always there. I could feel it brushing along the edge of perception, teasing, testing me. Then I heard it. Footsteps, faint, echoing, perfectly timed with the patrol's pace. 1, 2, 1, 2, like someone was walking beside me, keeping pace. I glanced to the side. Empty. Fog. Nothing but gray. I tried to shake it off, telling myself it was the sound of tires on wet asphalt or my imagination stretched in by the night. But the pattern persisted. The cadence of the steps didn't change, didn't falter. I slowed, heart hammering. The steps slowed too, exactly mirroring my speed. I held my breath, tried to listen for anything else, movement, wind, leaves, but all I heard was a quiet echo of invisible feet, and I twisted in my seat. Nothing. The fog outside seemed to thicken, pressing against the headlights, curling along patrol like smoke. Another step, another, closer. Then, strangely, they shifted, sliding behind me, circling, pacing in a rhythm that made no sense. I wanted to stop, to turn the wheel, backtrack, anything. But my instincts were paralyzed. Something about the fog, the footsteps, the night, it demanded I move forward that I called dispatch. Unit 37, do you copy? My voice sounded strange, distant even to myself, static, then a whisper, not over the radio, in my ear, don't. I jerked, twisting to the window, searching for a figure, fog, empty road. But I swear I felt a presence leaning in, closer than any human could be without touching me. The footsteps continued, slow, measured, but now I noticed something. Each step wasn't just beside me. Sometimes they came from behind, sometimes ahead, sometimes from the trees lining the shoulder where no path existed. Impossible angles that MY's stomach nodded. My pulse raced. The patrol seemed to vibrate with the rhythm of the steps. The fog mirrored them, rippling, folding. As if the road itself was alive, I forced myself to look straight ahead. The markers, faintly visible in fog, bent strangely, repeating, disappearing, then snapping back into alignment. Each time patrol passed one, a shadow flickered just beyond it. Human shape pale, drifting, fading. I blinked. Gone. The footsteps, though, didn't vanish. They echoed, sharper now, closer. They were everywhere and nowhere. I tried turning up the radio. Any sound to cut the silence. Static, intermittent words. Follow, don't. My name whispered in fragments between bursts of white noise. It wasn't my imagination. It was speaking to me, insisting, demanding. The fog outside pressed tighter. My breath fogged the windows, mingling with the mist beyond the glass. I couldn't escape it. Ahead, the road forked briefly. I hesitated. One path looked normal, straight, empty, fading into fog. The other seemed wrong. Markers skewed, repeating unnaturally. Reflections and puddles stretched beyond reason. And yet, instinct pulled me toward the second. I took it. The footsteps followed. Now they weren't just pacing. They responded to every minor move I made. I slowed. They slowed. I swerved slightly. They mirrored me, slipping through the fog like water. I could almost feel them brushing my shoulder. Faint and fleeting, but no figure ever appeared. The fog thickened, low and clinging, a blanket over everything. Headlights cut only a few feet ahead. I saw shapes moving in the corners of my vision, pale, elongated, bending impossibly. I blinked. Nothing. The footsteps persisted. I caught movement beside the patrol. A figure, white, featureless, almost translucent, gliding along the fog at perfect pace. I squinted. It shifted, rotated, flowing with the mist. My chest tightened. Tires hissed as I braked gently. But the figure didn't stop. It never fully appeared or vanished. It existed in a space between the real and the impossible. I gripped the wheel tighter, hands slick with sweat. The road seemed to twist beneath me. Markers duplicated, numbers repeating. The fog thickened further, pressing into the cabin, seeping through the air vents, curling around the radio antenna. The footsteps grew louder, sharper. Not random, they were deliberate, calculated, watching. I tried to speak again, to call for help, but the words caught in my throat. Another whisper, soft, intimate, brushing my consciousness rather than my ears. Closer, my pulse raced. I twisted the patrol around slightly, checking mirrors. Fog, nothing. Yet the steps persisted, circling, pacing, sometimes overlapping, always in impossible sync with my movement. I noticed reflections in puddles beside the shoulder. The figures appeared there, just for a fraction of a second, mirroring the footsteps' rhythm. Tall, pale, bending light in impossible ways. I blinked, gone, but the feeling lingered, an unshakable impression that something was always there, just beyond perception, waiting. The patrol rolled over a long stretch of cracked asphalt. The fog thickened to the point headlights were nearly useless. I strained to see, to focus. The footsteps shifted. Now, they weren't just beside or behind me. They echoed beneath the patrol, inside it, vibrating through metal and glass. My ears rang with phantom steps, shadows of sound that had no source. I reached a clearing in the fog. The road seemed to stretch endlessly in front, pale markers repeating, bending space. One figure appeared, floating slightly above the asphalt, featureless, white, and possibly thin. It moved perfectly in sync with the footsteps. I wanted to look away, but couldn't. My eyes locked with the impossible. It smiled. I swear it did, not with lips, but with intent. The fog shivered around it. I considered stopping. My mind screamed to halt, to run, to escape. But as I pressed the brakes lightly, the steps reacted, slower, heavier, closer. I felt them press at the cabin, filling the patrol with weight. I accelerated slightly, desperate. They kept pace, always keeping pace. I realized then they weren't walking. They were tethered to me, following my movement, alive, sentient, impossible. I forced myself to calm down, trying to trace the pattern. The figures, the fog, the footsteps. They responded to hesitation, to fear, to attention. And somewhere inside me, a part of my mind whispered the truth. The road, the fog, the footsteps, they weren't just around me. They were inside me. Ahead, a puddle reflected a figure's face. Not a normal face, but a distortion, featureless, pale, staring back. I blinked. Gone. Another step echoed. Not behind, not beside, but inside the patrol. The whisper followed. "You can't stop." I gritted my teeth, forcing the patrol forward. The fog pressed harder. Headlights revealed fleeting glimpses. Figures drifting at impossible angles, bending, disappearing, reappearing in puddles along the shoulder above the patrol. Footsteps echoed endlessly. My hands ached, gripping the wheel. Every nerve screamed, but I couldn't stop. And I didn't want to in some deep, terrifying way. Another whisper, intimate, insistent. "Listen." I froze. The footsteps paused too, hanging in the air like a hell breath. A shape appeared. White, bending light in ways impossible, hovering just beyond the fog. My pulse slowed in the pause. I dared a glance. It tilted toward me, the faintest suggestion of awareness, like it knew what I feared. And then the footsteps resumed. Faster, sharper, echoing from impossible angles. The fog seemed to move with them, rolling, folding, shifting the road beneath me. I realized I had no idea if I was moving forward or trapped in a loop. The road, the fog, the figures. They were one entity, alive, aware, and tethered to me. The radio buzzed again. Static. A whisper. "Don't look back." My pulse spiked. I dared to glance at the rear view. Fog. Endless gray. No sign of a road, no figures. Yet the footsteps continued, echoing inside the patrol. Inside me. I drove on, heart hammering, breath short. The fog pressed, figures drifted, footsteps echoed. The patrol became a vessel, carrying me through something that was no longer just a road, but a living, aware, impossible stretch of night. I realized then fully that I wasn't alone. I never would be, and the footsteps, they would follow me, always, tethered to my fear, to my attention, to the pulse of the fog and the road itself. I drove on. The fog wasn't just outside anymore. It pressed against the patrol like water, seeping under doors, curling around the mirrors, muffling the world into white nothing. I tried to focus on the road, headlights piercing a few feet ahead, but the fog swallowed everything else. Trees, markers, even the lines on the asphalt, they vanished into gray. I twisted the wheel, unsure if I was turning or just floating in place. Time became meaningless. Minutes stretched like hours. I tried to recall the last marker we passed, the last bend in the road, anything familiar, but my memory was a blur. Every sense screamed that we were moving, but the patrol's tires whispered doubt. The road ahead seemed endless, folding over itself, repeating. And yet the footsteps hadn't returned, at least not the ones I felt before, but a new presence hummed in the fog, slow, patient, watching. I reached for the radio. "Dispatch, this is Unit 37. Do you copy?" Static. Then a voice, distant, almost drowned by the fog, replied, "Stay where you are." It crackled and broke. I shook my head. I was moving. I couldn't stay. Something about the words chilled me deeper than the fog itself. The patrol shuddered over a hollow-sounding patch of asphalt. I slammed on the brakes. Nothing. The vehicle moved forward as if the road had no resistance, yet I could feel the tires gripping, spinning, trying to find purchase. The fog around us thickened further, almost tactile, brushing my skin, curling around my hands. I rubbed my arms. Damp, cold, alive. Then I saw it. A marker, or maybe it was something that had been a marker, floating a few feet from patrol, spinning slowly. Not upright, not flat, just suspended, twisting in impossible angles. I blinked and it multiplied. More shapes appeared, shadows that didn't match the road, the trees, anything real. Each one reflected light strangely, bending, refracting, as if the fog itself warped around them. I tried to stay calm, telling myself it was exhaustion, hallucination, stress. But the markers didn't obey my logic. One seemed to hover directly over the hood for a moment, then drift back to the shoulder. Another appeared mirrored in the puddles, though the puddles didn't exist in that pattern a second ago. The world wasn't behaving. It was rewriting itself with each second I looked away. I sped up, headlights slicing through the fog, cutting a narrow swath of gray. Nothing. The markers receded only to reappear closer, floating impossible. I reached for the radio again. Unit 3-7 to dispatch. Do you copy? Static. Whispered words, soft, brushing my consciousness. Lost drift. The patrol seemed to respond to the whisper, sliding as if guided by an unseen hand. I glanced in the rear view. Nothing but white. No road. No shoulder. No headlights behind me. And yet I felt eyes. Innumerable, unblinking. Following, watching. I tried to shake the thought. Grip the wheel tighter. Focus on the road. But the road was gone. Only fog, shapes, drifting markers, shadows that bent around logic. The patrol rolled over something soft. I braked immediately. Tires hissed, spinning lightly. I leaned out the window. Nothing. No debris, no puddle, no body. Just fog. But I felt it. Soft pressure under the tires. A lingering sense of something lost, something wrong. And then I noticed the reflections in the mirrors. Figures, pale, featureless, drifting just beyond the edges of visibility. They weren't human, not fully, but they weren't entirely the fog either. They were aware, waiting. I tried to turn, to double back, to find a landmark, but the world shifted. The patrol spun gently as if the road curved beneath us. Yet every time I looked ahead, the markers repeated, endless, looping, impossible. My stomach sank. Every attempt to escape only returned me to the same stretch of fog, the same distorted shapes, the same drifting markers. A whisper curled inside my skull. There is no way. I swallowed hard. I wanted to scream, but words caught in my throat. My own breath sounded loud, ragged, echoing into the fog, swallowed before it could return. Every instinct told me to stop, to retreat, to abandon the patrol, but I couldn't. Movement seemed like survival. Stillness, death. I glanced at the puddles along the road shoulder. Reflections rippled unnaturally, showing patrol at angles impossible to exist. My own face stared back, pale, exhausted, eyes wide with disbelief. Another reflection. This one didn't match me. It smiled. Featureless, silent, knowing. Then it warped into fog, folding back into nothing. I shivered. The radio buzzed faintly. Follow not alone. I jerked, reaching for it. Static. The whisper lingered, just beyond hearing. I forced the patrol forward, gripping the wheels so tightly knuckles whitened. The fog seemed to flow around the vehicle, parting, shifting, reshaping. Every glance outside revealed something new. A figure half buried in white mist, or a marker repeating endlessly, or puddles reflecting spaces that shouldn't exist. My mind rebelled, searching for logic, pattern, sanity. There was none. Minutes, or hours, passed. Time had dissolved. I couldn't remember which way I had come, or if I had even moved at all. The markers ahead twisted, stretched, bending space like they were alive. And then I noticed movement in the mirrors. Shadows, not beside, not behind, inside them. Eyes, countless, unblinking, tracking me. I blinked, gone, but the sense remained. They were everywhere and nowhere, tethered to my attention. The patrol rolled over a shadow patch. I braked. The tires hissed. Then I heard it. Something whispering under the asphalt. Inside the patrol. Faint footsteps, irregular, not human, pacing beneath the cabin. My pulse spiked. I gripped the wheel, forcing my eyes on the markers ahead. Shapes twisted in the fog. Shadows flickered in impossible directions. I tried to name them, to define them, to understand, but logic failed. I drove on, heart hammering, senses straining. The fog pressed, pulling, shaping the air like clay. Headlights illuminated a figure. Featureless, pale, floating just beyond the shoulder. It tilted its head at me, slow, deliberate. I tried to turn, swerve, escape, but the world warped. My own hands felt disconnected from the wheel, yet I moved forward, tethered to the fog, to the patrol, to something unseen directing everything. A reflection in a puddle caught my eye. Another figure, bending light, drifting impossibly. I blinked. It was gone, but another appeared, taller, slower, hovering above the asphalt, unmoving yet present. I realized then the fog was alive, the shadows were alive, and the patrol, my senses, my fear, they were all part of it. Part of a drift I couldn't escape. I tried to reason, tried to map the road in my mind. Impossible. Every turn repeated, every marker multiplied, every reflection warped. The footsteps below the patrol returned, soft, pacing, echoing, but now in impossible sync with the drifting figures outside. They weren't human, not real, yet they were tethered to me, aware, patient. I swallowed, tried to calm my racing thoughts, but panic crawled along my spine. I forced myself to focus on a distant marker, trying to measure distance. It stretched, elongated, repeating endlessly. Another whisper, soft, intimate. Stay, don't escape. The patrol's tires hissed, responding to every word, every thought. I realized the drift wasn't just around me. It was inside me, following me, waiting. Minutes passed, or maybe hours. Time dissolved completely. The fog folded, shifted, and the road ahead seemed to stretch forever. I caught glimpses in mirrors, puddles, reflections. Figures observing, bending reality, tethered to my perception. The footsteps beneath the patrol continued, impossible yet undeniable. I realized in the truth I had tried to deny. I was lost, not just on the road, not just in the fog. I was lost inside the drift itself. Time, space, perception, they had all dissolved. And whatever waited in the fog, tethered to patrol, and my fear would follow me always. I drove on. The last call had been quiet, too quiet. Normally, there's some crackle over the radio, someone mumbling about a barking dog or a minor accident. Tonight, nothing. The city felt hollow. I drove through empty streets, the patrol's lights bouncing off wet asphalt, reflecting neon signs that flickered like they were struggling to stay alive. I told myself it was just a slow shift, that this was normal, but normal didn't feel right. Every intersection I passed looked the same. Streetlights stretched long and dim in the rain-slicked streets. The air smelled faintly of exhaust and wet asphalt, but beneath it, something sour, subtle like iron and dust mixing in corners I couldn't see. I rolled down the window a fraction. The wind was still, but I could hear faint murmurs, not from the streets, but from the darkness beyond them. Faint, almost imperceptible. My skin prickled. The patrol's dashboard glowed, showing the last few calls. Noise complaints, a false alarm, a stolen bicycle, recovered, routine. I should have felt relief. Instead, my chest tightened. I'd been through these streets 1,000 times, and yet tonight, I couldn't recognize a single corner. Buildings loomed the same, yet smaller or taller. Shadows stretched in ways they never had. I blinked. Maybe it was just exhaustion. Maybe. I parked near the precinct, lights cutting into the rain. I stepped out, boots splashing in puddles, expecting the familiar smell of coffee and paper, the chatter of tired officers winding down. But the station was silent, doors locked, windows dark. I checked my watch. Mid-shift, too early to close. The hairs on my neck stood up. My radio crackled once. Static, then nothing. No chatter, no reassurance. Just silence pressing in. I walked around the patrol. The rain fell harder now, pattering on the roof, running down mirrors. Everything was wet, heavy, reflective. I caught my own eyes in the side mirror, pale, tired, wide with suspicion. Something felt wrong, like the city had paused while I blinked, leaving me alone in a waiting room I didn't recognize. The distant hum of traffic was gone. The usual buzz of the neon signs dead. Even the rain seemed louder, sharper, deliberate. I went back inside the patrol, sat behind the wheel. I reached for the radio again. Dispatch, this is Unit 37. You copy. Nothing. Static whisper at the edges of hearing. Not a voice, but a pressure, as if someone or something was leaning close, just beyond comprehension. I swallowed, shaking my head. I'd been through long nights before. I could handle this. Maybe it was just a storm. Maybe the city had emptied faster than usual. I started driving again, street after street. Each turn familiar yet off. Streetlights flickered in sequences I didn't recognize. Shadows pooled at corners, stretched along walls, moving just slightly when I blinked. Nothing concrete, nothing solid, but the unease gnawed, deep, silent, insistent. My pulse picked up. I told myself I was imagining it, yet every instinct told me, don't look too long, don't get comfortable. Passing an alley, I thought I saw a movement, a figure, quick, indistinct, just on the edge of perception. I blinked. Nothing. My chest tightened. The patrol's tires hissed softly on wet asphalt. Each sound magnified in the silence. I glanced around. The city felt empty, not asleep, not calm, empty, like someone had pressed pause and forgotten to resume. I reached for my coffee cup. Cold now, neglected in the holder. Steam rose faintly, curling unnaturally slow. I stared at it, counting heartbeats. 1, 2, 3. Shadows and the reflections twisted slightly. I shook my head. Too much coffee. Too many hours. Still, the feeling persisted, like the world had shifted a fraction I couldn't measure. The radio buzzed again, low, subtle. Not words, just pressure, a vibration I felt more than heard. I tightened my grip on the wheel. Eyes scanned every street, every dark corner, every flickering light. Nothing concrete. Yet I couldn't shake the impression of being watched, tracked, threaded through with something I didn't understand. Something patient. Waiting. I passed familiar stores, closed now. Some signs flickering. The bakery, the convenience store, even the corner gas station. All dark. Empty. Not normal. Not routine. I tried to recall the last time I'd driven this route. Blank. My mind refused memory. It was like the streets had rewritten themselves. Familiar in shape, unfamiliar in substance. I swallowed hard, trying to steady breathing. A sudden feeling, a tug at perception, not sight, not sound. I realized the shadows weren't random. They followed, mimicked, aligned with me. Not human, not solid, yet deliberate. I blinked. Each flicker of movement matched my glance. Nothing concrete, just impressions, but enough to make my chest pound and my fingers tighten around the wheel. I passed a puddle, asphalt slick, reflecting streetlights. In it, the patrol's lights multiplied strangely, dancing, bending. I leaned closer. A figure shimmered there, taller than any man, featureless, and only in the puddle. Blinked. Gone. Heart racing. I shook my head, telling myself I was seeing things. But the residue remained. A sense, a pull, a weight in the space behind my eyes. The patrol rolled forward. Tires splashed over shallow puddles. The reflections changed subtly. Shadows stretched further. My mind grasped for logic. Nothing fit. The street should have ended by now. The familiar turned toward the precinct should have appeared. Yet the city continued, empty, endless, insistent. I realized and the unease wasn't just a feeling. It was a pattern. Something in the city or the night or me had shifted. I drove slower, trying to catch familiar markers. Street signs repeated oddly. Buildings seemed mirrored, twisted. I caught myself gripping the wheel so tightly the leather creaked. A whisper brushed my ear, soft, almost imagined. Almost home. I jerked. No one there. No one could have been. Still, the whisper persisted, internal now, threading through thought, threading through fear. Headlights revealed a figure briefly, standing at a corner. I slammed brakes instinctively. Empty. No one. Just a fog curling off wet asphalt, rising in the dim light. My pulse thundered. The radio crackled faintly again, static shaping itself into a syllable, gone before recognition. Stay. My chest tightened, stomach hollow. Something wasn't right. Not the city, not the night, not me. Something in between. I tried to recall a call earlier, the mundane check-ins, the uneventful alarms, all routine. Yet my mind couldn't settle. One detail nagged. Something had shifted, something had watched. Something lingered in the pattern of light and shadow, patient, waiting. I swallowed hard, forcing control over hands, shaking slightly on the wheel. The streets curved. The city felt compressed, elongated, simultaneously familiar and distorted. I recognized intersections, but not distances. Shadows pulled in impossible ways. Reflections in puddles revealed more than they should. I blinked. Another figure appeared, fleeting, closer this time. Featureless, pale, observing, gone in a heartbeat. Yet the residue remained, pressing, insistent. I tried a radio again. Dispatch, this is Unit 3-7. Status? Nothing. Only static. The whisper soft, curling inside. Watching. I gripped the wheel tighter, forcing focus on the road. The patrol responded obediently. Tires gripping wet asphalt. Headlights slicing through fog. But nothing beyond that. No reassurance. Only the city bending, twisting, shadows stretching, reflections moving. I told myself, it's the end of a shift. Routine calls end. The city sleeps. Nothing more. Yet the feeling persisted. Eyes at every corner. Presence in every puddle. Patience in the silence. My pulse thundered, each heartbeat echoing through patrol, resonating with the whispers, the shadows, the reflections. I drove past one final intersection, hoping the familiar glow of the precinct would appear. It didn't. Only streetlights, wet asphalt, shadows, and the whisper curling tighter in my mind. The routine had ended. Yes, but something else had begun. Waiting, watching, patient, and I realized with cold certainty that the unease wasn't leaving with the shift. It had settled in. Inside me, I gripped the wheel, exhaled, trying to steady breathing. The city stretched endless, silent, impossible. The whispers faded, but the weight remained. Something had followed. Something had stayed behind. And I knew the night wasn't done. Not yet. I had been driving for what felt like hours. The streets were empty, slick with rain. The neon signs stretching in reflections that twisted and melted in the puddles along the curb. I told myself it was just a slow night, that this was normal, but the unease had settled in my chest, and no amount of reasoning could shake it. That's when I noticed it. A shape in the distance, far behind me, just beyond the reach of the headlights. At first, I thought it was another car, far off, lost in the reflections of wet asphalt. But as I moved forward, the shape moved, too, matching every turn, every slight adjustment. Not like it was following me, it was mirroring me. My pulse spiked. I blinked, shook my head. Empty streets. No one should be there. I told myself it was the reflections, shadows of signposts, maybe the dim trick of light on wet pavement. But something deep in my gut said otherwise. Something deliberate, patient, waiting. The figure stayed distant, vague, almost formless, but it was moving with me. When I slowed, it slowed. When I turned, it adjusted with uncanny precision. My hands tightened on the wheel. The patrol's tires hissed in the puddles, the steady rhythm of wet asphalt under rubber. And yet, no sound came from the shape. No tires, no engine, no footsteps. Just presence. I took the next turn sharply, hoping to lose it, and felt the city shift around me. Streetlights bent slightly as I passed, shadows stretching unnaturally along the curves. I glanced in the side mirror. Nothing. The figure was gone. Relief washed over me, shallow, fleeting. And then when I looked up again, it was back, mirroring, patient, its edges hazy and unstable but unmistakable. I drove faster, heart hammering. The patrol's lights cut through the mist, illuminating nothing but empty lanes. Yet every time I glanced at the lane beside me, the figure remained a dark echo of my own path. It didn't move like a car, more like a shadow that had learned to copy me. My stomach churned. How could it be there without sound? Without form, the city felt wrong. Familiar streets twisted subtly, buildings leaning at impossible angles, reflections in puddles danced, stretching shapes that shouldn't exist. And all the while, that figure followed, mirrored, mocked, observed. I swallowed hard, trying to steady my hands, control the wheel, control the rhythm, focus on the asphalt, ignore it. Another turn, another flicker. The figure adjusted instantly, ghost-like, always on my shoulder, never ahead, never behind, just perfectly aligned with me. I reached for the radio. Dispatch, any units nearby? Static, nothing. The whisper of the storm on rooftops was louder than any voice I could summon. The city had become a tunnel of fog, reflections, and that persistent shadow. I caught sight of it in a puddle again, tall, thin, its edges shimmering like heat over asphalt, completely still yet impossible to miss. I blinked. It was gone. My heart thundered. I told myself I was seeing things, hallucinations from exhaustion, but the residue of its presence lingered, like a weight pressing at the edges of perception. I slowed at an intersection. My headlights cut through fog heavy enough to taste. Nothing. Empty streets. Still, the feeling of being mirrored refused to fade. A whisper tickled the edge of hearing. A voice soft, almost teasing, curling through the fog. Close, close. I turned sharply, expecting an alley, a pedestrian, something real. Nothing. Just the wet asphalt, the reflections, the cold weight pressing in. I pushed on. Every familiar landmark became alien. The gas station, the bakery, the empty cafe, they all leaned slightly, as though observing me. Shadows pulled unnaturally in corners, spreading beyond logic, and the figure stayed. I could no longer ignore it. It didn't just follow. It existed in tandem, mirroring, anticipating. My stomach knotted. My pulse drummed. The city had become a hall of mirrors, and I was trapped inside. Another reflection caught my eye, puddle by puddle. The figure's form shimmered, unstable, bending in impossible ways, yet always unmistakable. It mimicked the patrol exactly. The tilt of the lights, the sway of the tires, even the way the rain splashed along the hood. I swallowed, voice tight. I could feel its attention, like eyes pressed against my back, yet invisible, untouchable. I turned a corner sharply, trying to shake it. Nothing worked. The streets stretched, elongated, folding in on themselves. Familiar intersections repeated. The figure adjusted instantly, a silent echo in the fog. Panic began to creep in. My mind wanted to reason, but reasoning failed. This wasn't just a city. This was something else. Something patient, waiting, playing a game I didn't understand. I reached a long, straight stretch of road. Headlights illuminated the fog ahead. Nothing but white haze. I glanced to the side. There was again, closer now, mirroring perfectly. And for a heartbeat, it wasn't shadow, not entirely. It had edges, form, substance. I yanked the wheel instinctively, heart hammering, but it remained beside me, tethered, persistent. I tried to call out, to demand it move, to reason with the impossible. Who, what are you? My voice echoed weakly in the patrol, swallowed by fog and rain. No answer, only presence, only patient mimicry. I could feel it studying me, learning me. Waiting for the moment, I faltered. I slowed again, desperately scanning side streets, trying to find a precinct, any familiar landmark. But the city had become a looping corridor. Every turn brought another repeat, another mirrored stretch. And every time I slowed, the figure stayed aligned, unthreatened, patient. My breathing hitched. My hands ached on the wheel. The fog clung to patrol, curling along the hood, across mirrors, against windows, thick and tangible. I glanced into the rear-view mirror. Empty lanes stretched behind me. I exhaled sharply. For a moment, relief. And then I realized I wasn't seeing it behind me. I was seeing it beside me, just outside vision, yet undeniably there, waiting, mirroring, breathing, almost. My chest tightened, my pulse raced. The patrol moved forward, but the city had become a corridor of shadows and reflections, my own panic feeding the shape beside me. Another whisper, softer this time, inside my head. Closer, closer. I slammed the brakes, tires skidding slightly in wet asphalt. Nothing. Empty. Just fog, reflections, and that inescapable presence. I gripped the wheel, trying to control the shaking. Rational thought, logic, experience, useless. The city had become a trap, and the figure, whatever it was, had the patience of a predator. I pushed forward again. Tire hiss on wet streets, the hum of the engine, the weight of fog pressing in, and the shadow beside me, adjusting, waiting, aligning. I caught glimpses in puddles and mirrors, in fleeting reflections off wet signage. Each time it became clearer, taller, more solid, not fully human, not fully shadow, something in between, existing only because I saw it, only because I feared it. I drove for what felt like hours, the pattern repeating, stretching endlessly, familiar streets looping, intersections folding back, reflections warping, and the figure never broke alignment, never faltered, always there, patient, waiting, observing, mocking. I realized then, it didn't need to catch me. It only needed me to see it, to recognize it, to fear it. And that fear tethered me to the road, to the loops, to the endless mirroring. Finally, I reached a brief stretch where the streetlights flickered stronger, a hint of clarity breaking the fog. The shadow remained patient, still beside me, and I understood something deep, chilling, unspoken. I wasn't just being followed. I was being mirrored, and mirrored is worse than followed. Mirrored waits, learns, echoes you, until one day, it doesn't stop at imitation. I exhaled, fingers shaking, grip tight on the wheel. The patrol moved forward, tires hissing, reflections twisting. I could see the end of the street. Maybe, maybe not. The fog pressed, the city warped, and beside me, the shadow remained, waiting, watching, patient. And I knew this night, this drive wasn't going to end. Not truly. The patrol's engine hummed low, a steady heartbeat in the empty streets, and I could feel every vibration through the seat. Rain drummed softly on the roof, steady, almost hypnotic. I told myself it was just another night shift, another long, uneventful stretch. But the fog had shifted somehow. Thicker now, heavier, pressing against the windows like it wanted in. I flipped the radio knob, a habit more than necessity. White static hissed through the speaker, faint, familiar, mundane. And then there it was, not a crackle, not interference. A voice, soft, clear, too clear. Officer, don't turn. I froze, hands on the wheel, pulse quickening. My mind scrambled for logic. Dispatch? Wrong frequency? A prank? But the voice wasn't a misfire. It carried weight, a presence that made the hair on my neck spike. Who is this? I muttered into the radio, voice tight. Only static answered. And then, again, the whisper dripping through the speaker like it was in the car with me. Closer, closer. I glanced at the rear-view mirror. Fog curling like fingers over asphalt. Nothing. Empty streets. Yet the tone, the timing, it was deliberate, patient, watching, waiting. The streetlights flickered overhead. I gripped the wheel tighter. I could feel the fog pressing through every crack, every vent. The voice came again, now from a different frequency, a different static, but unmistakably the same. Whispering, taunting, intimate. Don't look behind. I forced myself forward, heart hammering. My hand shook slightly, the wheel slick under my palms. Every instinct screamed to turn, to run, to escape, but the streets refused logic. Each intersection seemed unfamiliar, even though I had driven this route countless times. The fog distorted everything. Familiar corners now leaned unnaturally, buildings stretching impossibly, shadows pulling in angles that defied reason. I spoke into the radio again, clearer this time, desperate. Dispatch, do you copy? Silence. Not just silence, but the kind that presses into your chest, fills your lungs with weight. Then that voice, Closer now. Right behind you. I jerked the wheel, skidding slightly on the wet asphalt. The patrol's lights cut to the fog in arcs, illuminating nothing but mist and street. My stomach twisted. There was nothing there. Nothing. And yet, the voice had presence. It wasn't just sound. It was intent. I flipped switches, changed channels, even switched radios in the car. Static, white noise, silence. Then it would come back. Clear, calm, chilling, patient, whispering the things I didn't want to hear. Do you see it? You can't. I glanced into the mirrors again. Fog shifted unnaturally, curling at angles, reflecting shapes that weren't real. But each time I looked, I thought I saw a figure just beyond clarity. Hazy, waiting, watching, not moving like a person, moving like a shadow learned to imitate form. The voice spoke again, inside my head this time, or still through the radio. I couldn't tell. Closer, closer. I swallowed hard, teeth clenched. The patrol's headlights struggled against the fog. I could hear nothing else. No other cars, no wind, no rain, just the steady hum of the engine and the soft, deliberate rhythm of the voice. The streets warped, intersections repeated, buildings leaned impossibly, and that voice persisted, patient, coaxing, coldly intimate. I realized my pulse wasn't just fear, it was anticipation, like something was building, waiting for the precise moment I cracked. I tried reasoning, exhaustion, imagination, stress, but none of it accounted for the clarity of the voice, the way it matched the car's movement, the way it mirrored my own fears. It wasn't just sound, it was aware, alive, and I wasn't supposed to respond. I wasn't supposed to resist. I was supposed to obey, to listen. I turned sharply onto a side street. The radio hissed violently, white noise screaming through speakers. And then, unmistakably, do you see it now? The words froze me. My eyes darted around. Nothing. Empty street. Wet pavement stretching endlessly. But for the first time, I felt it, not behind me, not beside me, but in the very air around the patrol. Watching, waiting, echoing. I tried to move, push forward. My own shadow flickered on the hood in the patrol's light, distorted by fog. And I realized I wasn't alone. Not in a physical sense, but in a presence. Something had embedded itself into the car, into the space I occupied. The voice whispered again, clearer, closer, like it was speaking directly into my skull. You can't leave. I slammed the brakes instinctively. Tires hissed in wet asphalt. I swallowed. Air heavy, taste of ozone and rain in my mouth. No one, nothing visible. Only the persistent echo of presence and the voice. Whispering, patient. I tried speaking again. Voice low, controlled, shaky. Who are you? What do you want? Nothing. Then a pause. And another voice. Same tone, different words, deliberate. Look behind. My chest seized. I forced my eyes to the rear view. Empty street. Mirrors reflected only fog. Curving and pulling unnaturally. But my mind screamed. I knew it was there. I felt the weight of its attention pressing from somewhere behind the glass. Not a person. Not an animal. Something else. Waiting, mirroring, patient. I gripped the wheel, knuckles white. Tires hissed over puddles. Engine hummed. Steady, alone. And the voice, always present, always patient, whispered again. Closer. I realized then, the radio wasn't just a device. It was a conduit. The voice didn't belong to this world, or to any frequency I knew. It had learned me, followed me, observed me, and somehow it could reach me here, now, through nothing but wires and air. I sped forward. Headlights cut arcs through fog, but they revealed nothing. No reflection, no figure, nothing. And yet the voice pressed in, insistent, intimate. I could feel its awareness of me, of my reactions, my fear, my attempts to reason. It was patient, immovable, waiting for the precise moment I faltered. I took a corner sharply, brakes squealing. The voice whispered again, softer, almost tender, almost mocking. Do you understand now? You're alone, and yet not. My stomach twisted. My pulse thundered in my ears. I couldn't tell if the voice was coming from the patrol, from the fog, from inside me. It didn't matter. presence and voice had merged. One, something was here, patient, observing, waiting. I reached a stretch where street lights flickered weakly. Puddles mirrored the patrol's lights. And in each reflection, for a heartbeat, I saw a shadow that didn't belong to me. A dark silhouette against the wet asphalt. Hazy, shifting, patient. I jerked my head back toward the radio. Whispered again. Closer, closer. I gripped the wheel, shaking, trying to force clarity, force logic. But the city had warped, the fog thickened, and the presence pressed closer, tethered to me, tethered the patrol. The voice, patient, unrelenting, pressed into my mind with each repetition. And then, suddenly, silence. Pure, unbroken. No radio hiss, no rain, no hum. Just a patrol, tires on wet asphalt. And for a moment, relief. A brief, shallow reprieve. I swallowed, breath shuddering in my chest, convinced I had broken it. And then, a whisper, almost imperceptible, threading through the silence. Closer, always closer. My grip tightened on the wheel. My pulse thundered. The fog stretched endlessly. Streets repeating, reflections bending impossibly. And I understood fully, chillingly, that the night had only begun, that the voice, the presence, the figure waiting in mirrored reflections, they weren't bound by distance or time or reason. The patrol moved forward, headlights cutting arcs through fog that refused to disperse. The radio remained dead, silent, and yet I knew, patient, intimate, aware, the presence was still there, watching, whispering, closer than I dared imagine. Waiting for the moment, I faltered. I exhaled slowly, trying to steady my shaking hands. The street stretched, loops repeating, reflections multiplying. And behind that fragile calm, I felt it, the truth of the voice. It wasn't just following. It was inside, patient, waiting. And I had no choice but to drive forward, deeper into fog, deeper into the night. Tethered to a presence I could neither see nor escape. The first hints of dawn were pale and timid, brushing the horizon with gray light that hardly touched the world. The patrol's engine hummed tiredly beneath me, the companion I thought I could trust. I followed the familiar highway back to the station, eyes scanning for something, anything, that would confirm the night had been real. But the fog from earlier had long since lifted, leaving only empty, ordinary streets. The radio stayed silent. No whispers, no interference. Just static when I flipped channels out of habit. I thought maybe the night's events had been a hallucination, exhaustion pressing on my mind harder than the chill in the air. But the tension in my shoulders, the jitter in my hands, the lingering weight in my chest, they all said otherwise. By the time the station's outline appeared ahead, pale against the morning sky, I felt the night's presence lingering like smoke. I pulled into the lot and killed the engine. Silence filled the patrol like water. My own breathing sounded loud, harsh in the early light. Inside, the station smelled the same, coffee, bleach, old paper, but empty. No lights flickered in the hallways. No faint hum computers. No chatter of officers greeting each other. My boots echoed on the tile as I moved toward the dispatch office. I found the logs empty. Every call I had supposedly taken, missing trucks, accidents, road hazards, nothing existed, like it had never happened. My hands shook as I flipped through the pages. I even checked the online system. No records, not a single call. I pressed my forehead against the cool glass of the dispatch window. Nothing. My reflection stared back at me, pale, drawn, and a little wild from the night's events. And then I noticed it. A shape in the reflection that didn't match me. A figure, faint and blurry, standing behind the station desk. Empty halls behind it. I blinked, and it was gone. Heart hammering, I stepped closer, convinced I had imagined it, only to see shadows in the corners of the room, moving just slightly, as though the station itself was breathing. The radio on the desk crackled unexpectedly, white noise hissing through. My pulse spiked. I grabbed the receiver. Static, and then unmistakably the voice, the same voice from the night. Soft, calm, deliberate. "You came back." I froze, gripping the receiver like it might anchor me to reality. Who is this?" I croaked. My own voice sounded foreign in the empty station. No answer, only the softness of static, and then the whisper again. Did you think it ended? I pulled the receiver away, scanning the station. Empty. Nothing. Just walls and shadows, and the lingering smell of bleach. My mind raced. Was in my head? Had I fallen asleep at the wheel? But the memories of the fog, the whispers, the weight behind me, too vivid, too real. I moved through the station slowly, each step hesitant. Lockers loomed like dark pillars, doors slightly ajar, each creak of the hinges setting nerves on edge. The radio crackled again, faint, almost teasing, from the corner of the room. You can't leave what follows you. I spun. Nothing. The radio lay lifeless, the cord dangling like a slack rope. I felt my chest tighten. Every rational thought screamed it was impossible, but every instinct screamed it was here, somewhere, watching, waiting. I tried to shake it off, reassure myself. I made coffee, ran through reports, even called nearby precincts. They answered routinely, normal, mundane. They had no knowledge of any calls for my shift, none. Every attempt to anchor reality felt futile. I had walked through the night with a presence following me, whispering, shaping the fog around me. And now, the daylight mocked that experience, erasing proof. I sat in the break room, hands wrapped around the steaming cup. My reflection in the window across the table caught my eye, and I realized the shadow wasn't behind me. It was layered over me. My reflection flickered slightly, darker edges moving in ways my body didn't. I leaned closer, heart thundering, breath shallow. The radio on the counter clicked again. Static, then a whisper. You're still alone. I dropped the cup. Coffee sloshed across the tile. My heart raced. Alone? I wasn't alone. Not really. The air felt heavier, charged, thick with a presence that refused to be seen directly. It was patient, silent, omnipresent, waiting for acknowledgement. I ran through the station, checking every office, every hallway. No one, no sign of life, just the hum of fluorescent lights, flickering faintly. But the feeling of being watched was constant, unrelenting. Every corner, every reflection, every shadow seemed to stretch impossibly, holding forms that weren't real, yet undeniably present. I returned to the dispatch office, hoping for logic. Maybe the night's events had been a dream, a hallucination born of fatigue. But as I flipped the logs again, trying to convince myself, the voice returned. Do you see now? I jumped, heart hammering. I spun, empty room. The radio lay inert, yet I knew it had spoken, not through the device, but through the station itself, through the air, through the awareness I couldn't explain. I pressed a hand to my forehead, dizzy, exhausted, disoriented. The daylight outside did nothing to soothe the pressure, the presence lingering like a second skin. I wanted to leave, run, escape, but instinct screamed there was no way out. Not yet, not until it allowed. I checked the perimeter. Every door locked, every window secured. Nothing, and yet I could feel it. Everywhere, nowhere, pressing lightly against my mind, probing, patient. The voice came again just beneath hearing. You never left. I realized then the night had followed me. Not physically, not in patrol, not in fog. It had stayed, embedded, watching, waiting for me to notice, waiting for me to accept. I had crossed a line, and daylight had offered no protection, no comfort. The ordinary world continued outside, unaware, unmoved, and I was trapped in the gap between what was seen and what was known. I sank to the floor of the dispatch office, back against the desk, hands shaking, breath shallow. The hum of fluorescent lights filled the silence like a mock heartbeat. Shadows in the corners stretched, flickered, but never formed. The radio remained quiet, yet I felt the weight of presence pressing in. Patient, observant, unseen. The logs remained blank. The calls I remembered, the events, the whispers, they didn't exist for anyone else. I was alone in knowledge, alone in fear, alone with a presence that no one could confirm. And that loneliness pressed deeper than the fog ever had. I tried to rationalize. Fatigue, imagination, stress, hallucination. But each attempt only made the awareness more tangible. Like testing the air in a vacuum, I could feel the pressure, the resistance, the station, the radio, the daylight. It all became secondary to the weight of being watched. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Time had lost meaning. Each shadow held intent. Each corner promised observation. And the voice, patient and intimate, never fully left. Just whispers beneath perception, threading through thoughts, threading through space. I stood again, forced myself to move, to make sense of the station, to reclaim a sense of control. The hum of computers, the sterile smell, the mundane routine, all failed to anchor me. I was tethered now, not to patrol, not to the fog, not even to the night. I was tethered to presence itself, patient, observant, waiting for me to break or to leave or to see what it truly was. I glanced at the clock on the wall. Time moved forward, but unevenly. Something about the numbers felt wrong, stretched, compressed, echoing the distortions of the previous night. I rubbed my eyes, tried to steady myself. Outside, the world was ordinary. Inside, I wasn't. I wasn't alone. The final whisper came, almost a breath, almost a wordless assertion. You're still here, and I am still watching. I froze, breath caught. The presence didn't move, didn't act, but the way of it pressed, unmistakable, undeniable. It had followed me, persisted through fog, through night, into dawn, and now, in the pale light of morning, it was patient, waiting, observing, always near. I slumped against the desk, exhausted, fearful, uncertain. My hands shook, my mind raced. Outside, traffic began to hum, life moving normally. Inside, I was trapped between daylight and something older, colder, invisible. And I knew no one would believe me. No record existed. The night, the voice, the presence, it was mine alone. I had returned alone to a station that was ordinary only in appearance. And I understood fully, finally, the truth of being followed. It wasn't the fog, it wasn't the night, it wasn't the patrol. It was me, and I was tethered to something patient, silent, and relentless. I didn't know what it wanted. I didn't know how it reached me, but the awareness was absolute. The silence was absolute, and the station, the daylight, the logs, the radio, they could not protect me from being watched. I exhaled slowly, trying to ground myself in routine. Coffee, reports, normalcy. But I knew already that nothing would be normal again. And in the back of my mind, beneath every rational thought, the faintest whisper lingered, threading to the quiet of the dawn. Always here, always waiting.